You're listening to Well, I Laughed, part 2 of Naughty or Nice. The doctor is in. All right.
You're being very silent, and it's very ominous.
I was waiting for you to get set up so that way I can say this to you. I'm sorry that the target of the late 2010s, late 2000s, early 2010s, like 2009 to 2013, I'm sorry that you did not get a chance to experience that target and it's like full glory. Because you were in high school.
Yeah.
Like early high school during those years.
Yeah.
To be a college student at Target during that time.
That was a glorious.
All you needed was $20 in a dream. And then you would leave with $80 worth of shit you did not remember purchasing. But it felt good. It was our Saks. It was our Michael Kors. It was, I don't know names of clothes because I'm like a granola gay dude. But you know what I'm it was our REI no 10% discount, right? Like it was It was everything. It was
everything
this
everywhere all at once.
Yes,
is
correct.
Target.
Right,
Target is the everything bagel.
It's this bright temporal space.
Yeah.
And now you go there and like you're like, am I in somebody's living room right now? Like why?
Yeah, and then it's what's really bothers me about Target now is that you'll see something and you'll be like, oh, that's $10. That's like a deal. And then you'll like the thing right next to it. You're like, well, this has to be around the same price range. It's like 50.
Right.
And you're like, the fuck?
And the shoe section is always like disheveled. And now the changing rooms are just like tents they set up in the middle of everything. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And last night when I was at Target, everything smelled a little bit like vinegar.
Oh.
And maybe I've just gotten older, but I do believe that the Target clientele has gotten like younger. It used to be a place for us adults, and now it's literally the mall. And the electronic section is so undignified now. You know, they had departments that knew things, you know. You missed out on her. Honestly, the fall of Target kind of goes hand in hand with the fall of Starbucks. Like they used to be I had Starbucks this morning, okay? But you and I both know she's past her gleam, you know. It was a place to be. Now I go to Coffee Factory to get caffeine before I drive to school.
I don't know that I agree with you on that.
You don't.
I think that changed because of COVID. Because I think it was much more of a place like I'm going to go to Starbucks to like study because I did that even in high school.
Right.
And in college a lot.
I did that in high school.
And like but after COVID, like that wasn't the norm, and now everyone wants to go to like local coffee shops, which I mean I also did in high school. But like sometimes the Starbucks, I lived in the suburbs, so you couldn't find like a local coffee shop everywhere.
But it was like they used to have couches. They used to have like an aesthetic. I think they used to play music. Now I just feel like I hear like the little microwave oven going in and out.
I remember because at least when I was working there, one of the other baristas really liked K-pop, and we were not technically allowed to take over the music. Technically, like Starbucks HQ like gives you a playlist that you have to play. Sure. But like sometimes like whoever was like the manager or whatever would let us, and she plugged her phone in, and it was like the most awful shift of my life. Like I don't mind K-pop, but to hear like the entire album, like they have their hits, they have their flops, with love,
100%. Yeah,
like
every artist
and then
do.
like the album repeated itself,
right.
And I was like, I need to leave.
I know I've shared this story before, but I had a good friend in college who applied to be a barista at the coffee shop inside the main library at her university.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like the place. Yeah. And your application process was submitting a mixtape for them to evaluate.
You want to know who worked at the coffee shop at our library?
Who?
Tyler. Doesn't that just
But it's mines. You had no liberal arts majors. Like, it's all a gradient, you know? This place did have liberal arts majors. And just, I remember their philosophy being like, we can teach you how to make coffee. We can't teach you that, like, Vampire Weekend, who was new at the time, is good, you know? Like, you just need to know that.
The 1975.
Yeah. Like, as a person who was in Starbucks this morning, if after I said, venti cold brew for Thomas, I always use my last name. if you were to tell me as I turned around, see all these people, they're waiting to be taken across the river Styx, I would believe you. I feel like every time
you also went in a morning, though.
Yeah, which
no
is
one's
when,
alive at a morning.
No, but everyone is kind of supposed to have a place to be. I'm like, what are these NPCs just lingering in the corners of this store? And why are there no tables? Like, none of this makes sense. I love it.
All right, I've gotten a lot of mixed signals.
You can't keep a good man down, and you got to keep me caffeinated. So I will make sacrifices.
Oh, okay.
Until, of course, I decide I'm better off on my own. And back to being vulnerable. And it's hard. It's really hard.
It's honestly scary because I don't know which Grant I'm going to get when he walks in. It's gotten to the point where I can look at him for less than 10 seconds and be like, oh, no. What happened?
Well, it's just also... I know this is coming out in January now, but if you have teachers in your life, just let them know that you think they're doing a great job. Because I feel no, I don't have the emotional.
Think you're doing a great job.
You, you know I'm a little tipsy now.
You have had half of that.
I looked at Maia and I was like, I've cried several times putting together today's episode. It's a funny one.
I was like, what the fuck do you mean it's a funny one?
I don't know. I think we're going to have a good time, though. I really do think we're going to have a good time. Oh, speaking of, it's lunch the other day in my classroom. So, of course, I'm trying to eat my ham and pepper jack cheese sandwich on, like, full of seed bread.
Yes.
Because I'm in my 30s.
Yeah.
And I'm on like TikTok or Twitter, minding my own business, right? But of course, there's like 20,000 children in this room, and I like kind of chuckle, and a student looks over at me and goes, "Oh my God, mister, of course you'd be a literal LOLer. Like you're literally laughing out loud right now. Like that's so corny.
Get out of my classroom."
And I look at her and I go, "Hey guys, go ahead and everyone give me your attention real quick." Like that's not what you do during lunch. And I go, "If I can teach you one thing in this world, it is to experience as much joy as possible. Because no one's getting out of here alive." And it freaked them out. Gotta keep them on their toes.
Keeping me on my toes.
Classic Grant strategy. See, as long as I feel like I'm in control, the room stops moving. You know? I'm like the scene from the Flash. I'm the scene from the Flash. And the scene from The Flash where he's moving so fast everyone else has stopped. Yeah. That's me, but socially. Because some of you keep calling me chonkers in our Instagram posts. I talked to you about this at the beer garden.
You did.
They don't call me chonkers directly. They tag me in posts that says, when you're chonky but athletic AF, and then they just tag us and then go, Grant, ? You don't know me like that.
I could send that to him and it might go over okay.
Right. Griffin is allowed to say that to me because then I have equally vile things to say back to him because we've lived our lives with each other.
It's true. Yeah, I'll fight them.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine. Like, it's just part of the job. You know, I know you're no stranger to online hate, so I can handle it. Anyways, as I pull up my notes, any big stories from your day, Maia? How's it going?
I don't think so. Aside from Monet is being incredibly needy right now. Neither Casey or I were home during the day, so they were in their crates, and she's not handling it well. Also, we recorded a Cooking Time with Thomas on Monday.
We did.
It was for what would have been last week's episode for you guys, and Grant put some of the leftovers from the meal in a Cool Whip container, which was fine. I didn't realize that leftovers were in there. I thought he had just like put the container on the table, so I didn't take it initially. And he was like, "Oh, your leftover like pudding is in there," and I was like, "Oh, okay." So I grab it and I take it to work. It's just been living in the fridge at the office all day, or for this like entire week essentially, and I just eat it like as a snack.
Yeah, because I filled it up. Like I gave you a good amount of pudding. Yeah,
it's honestly the highlight of anytime I'm like a little frustrated. I'm like, time for some Cool Whip. But I got up after.
It's Cool Whip and it's angel food cake and it's vanilla pudding and it's raspberries, and
it's
so
like
it's not just
version
Cool Whip.
of trifle pudding, right?
Yeah.
And so I was going to put the container back in the fridge after lunch, I think like yesterday. And one of the higher ups, he has an office and I kind of have to walk through this like hall where all of their offices are to get to the kitchen. And he walks out of his office, like kind of like does like a once, so like he like looks down and then back up at my face. And I was like smiling. I was like, hey, Jake. That's a normal name. I'm not going to censor that. But he was like, he didn't even say hi back. He was like, is that actually Cool Whip? like I could tell he was about to walk into my boss's office to be like, Maya's not okay.
Maya needs mandatory 5 days PTO right now.
And I was like, oh no. And he didn't follow up. He just like walked into someone else's office after that. There was no follow up. He was like, oh, what else is it? Or like, he was just like, is that actually Cool Whip?
Listen, as a child, opening up a Cool Whip container in the fridge and finding Cool Whip was so rare for us that it was like a special occasion. And then you would start to eat some of it, and then you have to get a spoon, and you have to kind of like round it out a little bit. Because oftentimes it was mashed potatoes.
I have also put mashed potatoes. That unlocked a very deep memory for me.
Cool Whip somehow managed to perfect Tupperware in a way no company seems capable of doing so.
Yeah, what?
Yeah.
What's happening?
I know. The amount of, if you see a Cool Whip container in my house, it's because my parents packed them full of leftovers before I hit the road again.
They are. Speaking of which, I have some of your Tupperware.
Cool. Sweet. Awesome.
Yeah.
Love that.
I watched them and I was like, I should just not put these in the cabinet
This
or else
really
I'm going to
sweet.
forget
Just
again.
own them.
Yeah.
So I was like, I have several stories that I can't wait to share with you.
Yeah.
In fact, I even took notes on them. And then I just want you to look at my notes. You can read it out loud.
Podcast stories. Chad. Gluten-free. Pot pie. Not worthy arrows. With, and then parentheses, whips / cryptids, end parentheses, stub bucket.
Okay.
Those are all, I want you to know, there's an enter, like a space between all of them. It's a very
list.
spaced
It's a 5-item list. It's 5 different stories.
Very different stories.
I remember.
That was like a haiku, like a really bad one.
So I remember the Chad story.
Okay.
That's a cousin. I'll have to tell you guys on page.
Yeah.
I can't air that kind of family story out on Maine. No reference whatsoever to gluten-free or pot pie. I know what the story, not worthy arrows, whips / cryptids.
That's such a
I do know
strange
what story
combination of
that
words.
was trying to pull up. No idea what it was in reference to in the last episode. And then I do remember what Stub Bucket was about and have no way to explain myself to it.
Oh. Well, that's good. Did I have any stories? I don't think I wrote anything down. Oh, me and my boss have just been exchanging office quotes and then laughing about other people not getting those office quotes. It's been funny. I told Tim yesterday, I have a very close friend whose parent passed away recently. And so I went over to bring them dinner because I know like when you're grieving, it's kind of hard to, and she's like managing all the funeral stuff. And so I made them dinner and I told my boss, I was like, hey, I'm going to head out early so I can make this soup. And then also I was like, why does it feel like soup should grow on trees? Like, how do you make a soup?
What is wrong with you?
Soup just is. Soup exists. I don't know how to make soup. And he responded,
Listener, I'm also disagreeing, just so you know.
well, I know now I made a good soup. I've made several soups since I've met you. I get it now, but they don't feel like real foods.
I do forget sometimes the real parameters around your like lack of cooking knowledge, essentially. And I'm reminded during our cooking time with Thomas when you're like, why are you doing that? And I go,
Yeah, so you're also supposed to be explaining it to the people, like it's for me and for them.
It just feels so obvious that I forget to mention it. I'm like, oh, I'm cooking this down. Oh, we're reducing it a little bit.
Oh, we're deglazing, which I did learn from you.
Good. Oh, yeah.
This is how he responded. He said, one of the 2 things I know how to cook is soup. Is a soup. And he said, I'm always a little amazed at how things are different based on how you add them and how long they soup for.
Simmer. It has a term.
How long they
This is me
soup
with engineering.
for?
Simmer. It has a term. We're not just making up terms.
I responded, I was like, how long they soup for? And he said, put it in your little notes app. Because I have a notes app just of quotes from him. I think I've said this one before. My favorite from him is, the worst day of my life was the day I found out I was a Hufflepuff.
That is actually so devastating.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I know, yeah.
You asked me the other day how to glaze a carrot, how to make roasted carrots.
I think I did okay.
Yeah?
I think I did too much honey.
Okay, so did you do...
I did the baby carrots because I didn't have time for the other one.
Yeah, totally get it.
Orange juice? Shocking.
I know, right?
I expected it to smell worse than it did.
It adds a tangy sweetness to your carrots.
It was nice.
I know,
It was
right?
good. Yeah.
It was so cute. I sent her a 2-minute video because she was like, "Can you tell me how to cook carrots for this friend? You just explained cooking in a way that I understand." And because I got that text message at school, I was like, "I'm not ready for this right now."
Like I know how to like I could look up a recipe, but it just felt, I don't know. I was like, Grant can
This
explain
is me
it
looking
better.
up a recipe.
Yeah.
Grant
is the recipe.
And for the record, because I now know that's like the 8th comment I have made this episode about my current emotional state, I really am fine. As I explained to Maia when I came in, I was like, I currently feel like how I usually feel at the end of the speech and debate season in March, like right before spring break, which is like the day after our last like regular season tournament of
Just
the year.
Emotionally strung out.
Right.
Yeah,
Just I look around my house and it's just full of pots that I have been making butter noodles in. Good quality butter. If you're listening there, of
I
the
also
Patreon.
got good quality butter for
It counts.
the chicken noodle soup.
But it was like all I've eaten is chicken noodle soup, and I'm like, or sorry, all I've eaten is like butter noodle, and I am sobbing at season 1 Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is not the emotional
that's not
season.
the sad one.
And I'm like, oh, I've just been kind of tightly wound recently.
I do that sometimes. Like if I have a lot, obviously it's the same as you. Like if I have a lot going on, I'll get really emotionally strung out. My tendency is to first be angry at like everyone and then get really sad. And boy, does that confuse Casey. Because I can explain neither of those emotions.
Really? Because I do feel like I've seen you go through that cycle a couple times, and I'm like, yeah, girl, get your tits out. Like, like she's doing what she does.
Casey's a problem solver, so he knows if I'm angry or sad. He's like, "What can I do? What do you want me to get chocolate? Do you want me to leave you alone? Like, can I bring your weighted blanket or something?" And I'm like, "Don't talk to me."
Exactly. And I want you to know that I get that, because even me telling you why I'm in a weird mood is growth for me. And even tonight when I was like in my weird mood, I used the phrase, "A narrative that is going on in my head. And one that I know is not true and I'm working on is blank."
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to own all of this. So don't tell me what to do.
The way Casey was immediately like, "I get it." I was like, good for you. Cousins. They're bonding.
Things are going well. Things are going They're going well, though. They're going well. Today's...
That was the least convincing thing you've said today.
Time. Okay, because it's going to be followed up by this. I got home earlier than usual today. It was our early release. We had some planned time. Got home a little bit earlier. Needed to finish like structuring my story. Had like 90% of the information.
That always takes way longer than I think it will.
I need to remember that that's actually the storytelling part of this whole storytelling podcast.
Yeah.
But I still... Listener, I had some wine last night, and instead of really like cooking anything with that wine, I just had leftover like white cheddar truffle cheese and a red wine marinated like salami, and so I just had charcuterie and wine last night for dinner.
Wow,
lovely. Turns out it was a lot of sodium though, so I still had a little bit of truffle cheese and like leftover charcuterie meat. So I ate that for my after school snack, and then still hungry, made a dozen chicken fingers.
Hold on 2 seconds. Hello? They hung up on me. I got a call the other day.
Wild that you would answer that.
Well, it was Denver and I was panicked. I got a call. Was it today or yesterday? I got a call yesterday that I picked up, which is rare. I was expecting a call back from a vendor though, and so I picked it up. And it was like, it was obviously a recorded message because they started talking before I could even say hello. But they were like, "This is so-and-so with such and such a company. When you get a chance, please call us at this number." And then it hung up on me.
Nope, that's a scam, girl.
Oh, I'm sure it is. But I was like, fuck yourself.
This is far too late for me to say because we're fully done with the holiday season by the time this airs. But you're going to start getting text messages from companies claiming to be USPS, sending you tracking numbers. Please do not click them.
Never. Yeah. If they're like, your address is incomplete, or your Amazon, they also do that for Amazon. There's also a thing with Gift cards. Have you seen this?
No.
People, scammers have been going in and then stealing the gift card, right? And then
What do you mean stealing the gift card?
like taking
from the store?
They'll either steal it or they'll do this in the store, but they'll like, you know how a gift card is usually like in an envelope that you have to like pop open, you know? They'll like open it just barely and then they'll cut off the barcode portion of it, the portion that has like the redeemable code and stuff, but not the barcode that you scan at the store. And then they'll close the thing back up and then they'll hang it back. And so they just wait for someone to buy it and load it and then they use it. So if you're buying a gift card, feel inside the thing and make sure it actually feels like the full card before you buy it.
That is good to know.
Yeah.
I'm just so deeply distrusting of everything.
Yeah. Every time I put my card into any gas station, like card reader, I'm always like,
are you
feeling
pulling it out?
Trying to see
show me
yeah.
your true version.
Yeah. Or at the gas station or whatever, or the grocery store. Yeah.
Any other stories on how was horseback riding?
Oh my God.
Go ahead and cut the last 10 seconds of silence. Hey Maya, how was horseback riding?
I went today. This was the first time I've been since before Thanksgiving, because I was sick the week after and then the week of Thanksgiving.
I'm just realizing we didn't put any eyes in that.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I've been aware of that.
News to me.
No, good.
Sorry, go ahead.
I got put on this horse named Arlo. Basically, my trainer just kind of decides what horse I'm riding that day, and it's kind of like a lesson stable. So most of the owners at that barn let the trainers at that barn use their horses for lessons, and it's a way to get their horse exercised and trained and stuff. So I was on this horse, Arlo, who is actually one of the other trainers' horses. He is very small. He is very speedy. And I walked in and Tia, my instructor, was like, "You're going to be riding Arlo." And then I start walking over to Arlo's stall and they're like, "Oh my God, you're going to die at what Arlo looks like." And I was like,
what does Arlo look like?
Well, one time I went in and they had, he has like a mohawk for a mane.
Okay.
Because they have it shaved that way.
Right.
One time I walked in.
No, I didn't think Arlo was choosing it.
No. Well, some horses
Cut
like.
my life into pieces. Go ahead, sorry.
There's like Fjord? Oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the horse. There is a breed of horse that just has like a mohawk. Mm-hmm. But that mohawk was shaved into dino spikes along its neck. And so they were called, Arlosaurus or something. And so I was kind of expecting something like that, but I look and his mohawk is fine, his face is fine, and I'm like, okay, so I take off his blanket and his entire butt is shaved with like the pattern of like giraffe spots.
What?
And I was like,
just in a silly, goofy little mood.
What did you do?
Just in time for the holiday season.
Yeah. He looks very dignified. Thank you.
Sorry, on that note, cut my life into pieces. I hate to tell you, and I'm listening to those who are closer to my age range in our listener base, you're going to be able to kind of understand it, but like children looked at me in my dead honest face on Monday.
My dead honest.
And they said, yeah, my top 3 artists were blank, blank, and 303. And I said, oh, what? They're like, yeah, 303, like the band or whatever.
They're having a comeback?
Yes. Same with Vampire Weekend and another kid. Oh, I loved it so much. Bon Iver was in their top 3.
Bon Iver tracks.
Correct.
Vampire Weekend tracks.
But they called it Bon Iver. So at 31, I got to have that moment that so many of us had in 2012 where I went, actually, it's pronounced Bon Iver. It's a play on a French word for good winter. I don't know if you know that or not, but it's actually Bon Iver. It's Bon Iver.
303 actually shocks me.
Yes.
I saw them live.
Tell your boyfriend if he's a vegetarian and I ain't freaking scared of him or whatever.
The way I scream that line.
Is this moment where you're like, the kids are going to be all right, and also I should fill out an application to AARP?
Yeah. I saw them live. I'll get back to horseback riding in a second.
Are they from? Oh, I thought we were. I'm sorry.
They are from Denver.
Okay.
When they perform, they usually wear like Nuggets jerseys.
Ooh.
I saw them because I was on that event planning council in high school or in college, and we would go to the national
Right, showcase thing.
activities or a campus activities conference.
Right.
And they would have, it was basically just like a talent show for like 3 days. It was the best thing ever.
My dream, by the way, is to perform there, either with you or solo as a stand-up comic.
It's like you either are there on your way up or you're there on your way down.
Right, no, and I think that's such an incredible space to be in.
Yeah.
That is why I want to go.
But I saw 303 there. They're always the headlining, like the biggest artist performs on, what is it, like Tuesday night, because it's like a Saturday to like a Tuesday or something.
Okay.
It would always perform on one of the last nights, the final act at the very end. And it was 303. And we all saw them and we were like, they're not okay. And it turns out they almost like didn't make it to NACA because like one of them was sick and then they like still performed.
You're like,
but we were like,
ill.
They were ill, but they're also way older than I thought they were. And that was 5 years ago.
Okay. Well, that is fascinating because they are absolutely having a comeback right now.
That's insane to me. That's appalling,
I
actually.
looked at a child after they ran me through some of their like music taste or whatever, and I was like, you would have loved Prom 2010. Like I have, like we're all there in Nokia phones and bright lime green everything. I wore seafoam green, which did you know that's a blue?
I feel like they feel like the way our generation feels listening to the Beatles.
No, because when we were listening to them, there was 50 years difference, it feels like. This is like 10.
I know, but there was a TikTok that I saw that was like...
I love how upset she already is. You can't see it, but she is.
You know, in the like early 2000s, late 90s, girls would wear those like little tiny clips in their hair.
Yeah, because then I would find them on my sister's floor.
Yes.
And I would put my pinky in a finger trap.
Yeah. Some like Gen Z girl was like, you know how in the olden days they used to...
Olden days.
And I've had to contemplate like everything since then.
Did you ever double shirt spaghetti strap yourself?
I did in elementary school,
two different shirts, both of them with spaghetti straps.
No, I would always wear like a long sleeve or like a t-shirt because I wasn't allowed to wear spaghetti straps.
That doesn't shock me.
Yeah.
Nor should you, because of course if you wore a spaghetti strap, you were
I'd be distracting
Democrat.
to the boys.
There's this great account on TikTok that does like it's 2007 and you're getting ready to go out with friends or whatever, and somehow she found a flip phone, and every time she opens it she like throws it open with her chin, and that's how I know she lived through it. This isn't a historical reenactor.
Yeah, no,
this is a Vietnam flashback for her.
My favorite is Matt Damon in She's All That. No, it's the one with Amanda.
You mean Channing Tatum and She's the Man?
Channing Tatum. Yes. Jesus. Channing Tatum.
Stanley Tucci. Sorry, back to the show.
When he's trying to like hit on that girl and he just like flips his phone open
I think
like
it's
that.
hilarious. You think I listened to a single dialogue moment and She's the Man? I was just like, Channing Tatum. Oh, it's Amanda Bynes. Channing Tatum.
He was something else.
It was. Aged like fine wine for one of them. Yeah.
Amanda Bynes is also having a bit of a comeback, I think.
Is she?
No, maybe I'm thinking of Lindsay Lohan.
You are thinking of
I
Lindsay
am thinking
Lohan.
of Lindsay Lohan.
This is why you keep me around.
Yeah, Lindsay Lohan was in a bunch of Hallmark movies.
Correct.
Right?
And
yeah.
I'm very excited to make my family watch all of them this Christmas.
Nice. Horseback riding.
Oh, okay.
My trainer worked the shit out of me. I'm going to be sore tomorrow. I decided to ride English, which was in hindsight a mistake. But there's just less support on your legs, and Arlo has a lot of speed, and so I was trying to like keep him from slow him down or make him relax. But unfortunately, Arlo doesn't like being ridden with a heavy rein or a heavy leg, and that's what I usually ride with because that's how you ride a horse. With you kick and you use your reins. No, you ride with your seat.
Interesting.
Which I've done, like I know how to do it, but I've never had a horse that like so ardently despises having the reins pulled or like having a leg on them. It was wild.
I have almost no context for what you just said, but it sounds difficult.
I would ask him to slow down with the reins, which is what you're supposed to do, like sit back and like pull the reins back, and that's supposed to slow them down.
It's kind of crazy that you're driving a car that also has free will.
Did I tell you this? When I was first learning how to drive a car, my first instinct was to like lean forward and like click to get it to go faster.
Soft nudge the car?
Yeah,
Good.
basically.
Gentle parent that car into a car accident.
The way my dad like had to be like so quiet to letting me figure that out.
No more horseback riding so you can drive a car, little lady.
But yeah, you're supposed to like pull the reins to slow them down. anytime I would pull the reins, he would like take the bit and push his like nose up, which essentially like takes a lot of the pressure off of his mouth so he doesn't have to listen anymore.
Funny.
And I would use my leg to like cue him to like go faster or something, and instead of going faster, he would just move to the side. And I was like, you son of a bitch.
Needs to bring him to a Subaru dealership, get his
wheels checked.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then at some point I was just trotting along doing a posting trot, which is where you like stand up every other beat kind of. And then my trainer was like, and drop your left stirrup. And I was like, what? And she was like, most of my students are new and don't question me. I was like,
that's teaching, baby.
Yeah.
That
she was
is
like,
teaching.
drop your stirrup and keep posting. And I was like, what do you mean? What does it mean, Tia? She was like, you can do it. Just do it.
I needed a content warning before this story because we dropped a brand new concept and theory on our freshmen on Monday, and my upperclassmen are doing a very good job of walking through it. But when the upperclassmen are done walking the freshmen through it and they don't still understand, I then have to answer the questions and to deal with their anxiety. And it's the worst thing in the world. I mean, obviously, it's not this like poverty and like hunger and stuff, but for me, it's ruining my days. Yeah.
Good.
Are you in the mood for a chuckle?
I'm in the mood for a chuckle. Do you want to refill your beverage first?
Probably need to kind of wait to see what the effects of the current beverage are going to do to me. Just knowing myself.
I've come to the conclusion that we need to take a break every hour to hour and a half because I think we both get fatigued.
Mm-hmm.
I was just editing an episode and I was like, I was looking at it and I was like, why is this only one camera file? And I was like,
you never took a break.
Take a break. That's why.
We'll get 30 minutes into this. I'll know a little bit more about the state of mind that I'm in.
And then we'll talk about
it
and we'll consider it. Yeah. Okay.
I want you to know, Maia and listener, you can root for everybody in this story.
I don't know. It had you crying several times. You said so.
Because I think it's kind of a gorgeous story, too. You can root for people in this story. That's the first thing I want to tell you.
I don't know if I trust you.
Second, I'm going to start off saying something, okay? It is a historical clip pulled from the 60s. It's also my advice to you this episode. So with that...
The 60s? You want me to take advice from the 60s?
Here it comes.
Okay.
This program contains explicit sexual language and may not be suitable for all viewers. The host is Dr. Ruth K. Westheimer.
Okay.
Jerry Seinfeld. Quote, "You have changed sex for America." Dr. Ruth, "Don't tell me it's worse now." Jerry Seinfeld. "No, it's better."
How was that advice?
It's I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna go ahead and So today's episode is about Dr. Ruth K. Westheimer, also known Westheimer, Ruth K. Westheimer,
sure,
also known as America's foremost sex therapist.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is a wild topic for you to choose.
I'm aware because you seem really nervous now.
I'm very nervous.
So, who is this woman? The connection to the theme, naughty or nice, is obvious. She's a sex therapist, Maia. What probably isn't obvious is how a 60-year-old grandmother in the heart of the Reagan administration with a thick foreign accent became America's leading sex advice therapist.
In the 60s?
So kind of started in the 60s, really took off in the 80s.
Okay, that
makes
more sense.
So you have no idea who Dr. Ruth K. Westheimer is?
No.
It's Westheimer. You have no idea.
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you know what I mean when I say sex therapist?
Yes, I know what that means.
Okay.
I'm worried you're going to get into dominatrix
people pausing
territory
right now and Googling. Well, let me let you know. Dr. Ruth, as we're going to call her, she has some thoughts on that. Okay.
On being a dominatrix?
Do you want me to answer that question right now?
I
or do you want to hear the story?
Okay. Tell your goddamn story.
Okay. But you're intrigued a little bit and a little confused.
I'm nervous for you and your career as a teacher.
As I've said multiple times to my students, our podcast is not inappropriate for children, but is not their target audience either. Like, it's not advertised for you. Like what we talk about, my own personal life, for instance, I think is oftentimes far more revealing. We're going to be talking about a woman today who was on cable news in the 1980s. And while I will be saying the word sex several times, I won't actually be saying, especially myself, anything that is inappropriate or that wouldn't be covered freshman year of a health class. And in fact,
I trust you.
Our trepidation
Is what she's worried about.
Yes. And what she spent her lifetime working towards.
Good.
So let's lock in.
I'm just now remembering that Casey's mom listens to this. So
listen, honestly, here's the thing. Casey's mom, my mom, if you were to say, hey, what's your thoughts on Dr. Ruth? They would have thoughts. Like, I don't think you understand how well known Dr. Ruth is, how respected
she's still alive?
She is. All that's to be answered, babes.
Well, you said is.
All of that. Our story begins. In the beginning, God created man and woman, and eventually one of those women was Dr. Ruth.
What the fuck?
I'm just riffing now.
I thought you had actually written that down. No. I was like, that's why you were crying.
I did write in the beginning, right, because I'm reliving religious trauma in preparation for the Christmas Eve service I'll go to. I never cried at that. There's prime rib after. Our story, it's going to get a little serious. Sorry, real quick. Story's going to get a little serious. Our story begins on June 4th, 1928, when baby Carola Ruth Westheimer was born.
Okay.
She lives in Frankfurt, Germany.
Okay.
It's 1928. We've all seen the musical Cabaret.
Yeah.
The Nazis are coming.
Welcome.
And bienvenue. Welcome. A man texted me that the other day.
Ew.
Instead of saying good morning, which I already hate, but to do a silly little bit when I haven't been to my purgatory Starbucks yet, absolutely not.
That was good.
Thank you.
That was good.
Came up with it on the spot. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's clever. I'm having a good time. I think the drink did it for me. I think we're definitely going to want another one, though.
Well, yeah. I can tell you're very different than when you walked in.
Because I have a lot of fun when I do this with you. And it's like not a stressful thing.
Shut up. I'm going to cry.
Even though I did spend 3 hours basically being like, like putting the story together. I'm excited for it. Okay, so the Nazis are coming, right? Also, second side note. Already 2 side notes to this. The only note. She's only 4 months older than my grandmother who passed away in the spring.
Wow.
And there are, honestly, a lot of similarities between her and my grandmother. Also, obviously, some pretty stark
lot of differences.
One of them's Jewish.
Yeah. Good.
But a lot of similarities.
Jesus.
Okay. Oh, man. I should have revisited the first part of these notes again real quick.
I hate when that happens.
Okay. So, born in 1928, first 10 years of her life, bucolic, wonderful. Obviously, her parents are slightly, increasingly worried about anti-Semitism that's on the rise in Germany. And then it all comes ahead at Kristallnacht, which is this night. It's known as the Night of Broken Glass, where the Nazis essentially in one evening, one weekend, assault Jewish businesses and organizations across all the territory that they controlled. So Germany, the annexed portions of Austria, the portions of Czechoslovakia and the Sudetenland. And it's like this first real moment where just out and out, unapologetic political violence on a national, clearly organized scale occurs. 10 days later, young Carola's father is arrested by the Gestapo. Here's what she would later remember. The Gestapo knocked on our door and arrested my father. I remember watching him as he was loaded into the car from our window. I watched my father and he looked at me. He saw me through the window. He waved and he winked and then he stepped into the covered truck, which would take him to Dachau concentration camp. I remember that wink. I remember that wave. And I thought, he's going to come back. But they did not release him right away. Like many German Jews had hoped. A moment of arrest, scare. And then, that does not happen. And so fearing what's about to happen, Carola's mother and grandmother make an incredibly painful decision. They are going to put her on a Kindertransport, which are these organized efforts to evacuate
children,
Jewish children from Nazi-controlled areas. The tragic thing about a lot of these kinder transports is that they transport children to countries that will eventually be invaded by the Nazis. So when Belgium and France take a lot of Jewish children, it simply proves to be a delay, not a real rescue. Yeah. Carola gets sent to Switzerland.
Oh, okay.
And so she's 10 years old, and she remembers not wanting to go. As she would say, I had 13 dolls, I had 2 dollhouses, I had roller skates, and a grandma whose only job was to take care of me. I loved my childhood, and I loved my parents. But I remember going onto the train platform and looking through the window at my mother and my grandmother. And of course I'm scared, and of course I'm sad. But I remember what my dad did when he was loaded into the car.
Waved.
So I smiled and I winked and I waved at them. And as the train pulled away, I looked at all these children who were also in the same position I was. And I made the decision to find joy in that moment. And we sang. And we sang our way to Switzerland.
I get why you were crying.
Yeah, especially when I was like half a bottle in. And I'm like, the human spirit's undefeatable. Because you know how I get all hope core like that?
Yeah, you do. You do.
In like a really annoying way for you
What was that
sometimes.
movie that we saw that I came
exactly. No, sorry, go ahead.
The movie
Because I
that
know
I
it wasn't
came in,
Gladiator 2.
Yeah. When I came in after like barely making it and was like, what was the name of that movie?
Oh, what was it?
Okay, I'm glad that you also can't remember it.
But
right
no,
off the
what
top
it
of
was
your
like,
head.
it was really,
Yes.
really intense. It was.
Sound? No.
It's not The Sound of Silence.
No.
But it's the movie where they follow the family that runs the Auschwitz concentration camp.
Where the fuck
I'm going
is
to
my
let you keep
phone?
looking that up. I'm going to get some facts out on the table as you do.
Yeah, do that.
Okay, so Carola, it's now from 1938 when Kristallnacht happens. In January 1939, she, on this train with hundreds of other Jewish children, gets sent to Switzerland, where she is housed by a Jewish refugee organization that manages to put her in an orphanage.
The zone of interest.
Thank you.
Nice.
Zone of interest. What were we going to say about the zone of
I'm
interest?
just remembering the zone of interest and then when we went to visit Dachau.
Yeah. I kind of forget how big our lives have been together the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Like you just kind of entered from stage left into my life, and then, like,
Now I'm here.
now I'm drunk in your basement, reading about a sex therapist to literally thousands of listeners.
You just woke up.
Some of whom are my students. And of course, your mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And my mom in about 9 months.
Yeah. And Griffin.
Right. And like next week.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So back to the Nazis. So Carola, she's 10 when she arrives at this orphanage in Switzerland. Even though she's 10, she's older than several of the children who are 5, 6, 7 when they get sent. And also she's Jewish, and it's not a home specifically for Jewish children. They just accept Jewish children.
Okay.
So the combination of her being older than some of the younger children already and the fact that she's a Jewish refugee.
It's kind of been otherized.
Correct.
Yeah.
And she's immediately put to work because of that. Like she is immediately part of the childcare system at this orphanage. She talks about waking up before 7, taking care of herself. And then at 7, she goes and wakes up the girls that she's responsible for. She gets them ready, feeds them breakfasts, attends a little bit of school at the orphanage. At noon, feeds the kids, puts them down for their naps. While they're napping, she mends their clothes. She helps clean the house, things like that. She'd also talk about how terrified she was of the headmistress of this orphanage. So even in her own personal diary, she never wrote anything specifically
About the
mean
mistress.
about the headmistress. There are clearly notes that she can point to later.
That are like, this was me
saying about this or whatever. This was me capturing that moment. But she'd be like, I feel very fulfilled by my chores. I wake up every morning and I get a chance to clean the entire first floor, right? And so it like documents it in a way that's like, and she would go on later to be like, that orphanage saved me.
Yeah.
Like it was maybe the only place in the entire universe where I would survive the Holocaust. And because she becomes America's leading sex therapist, obviously she survives the Holocaust.
That was an insane sentence. That sentence has never been said before.
Well, it might be about Ruth
Well,
Westheimer,
just
but
about
in
her.
general,
Yeah.
you're right. It's not a sentence said a lot,
Yeah.
but there is a chance that I just said the first, a new sentence for the universe. You
Yeah.
are correct about that.
That's insane.
Sorry, I also got to, Maya, you might want to cut this. I don't know. Your call later. Also had to just quickly approve a house showing for my home tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
A lot of stuff happening.
Yeah.
Remember earlier today when I was like, I'm overwhelmed by the way my life is right now.
That's why.
So Dr. Ruth, he knew it was coming. They knew it was coming.
Yeah.
She arrives at the orphanage 1939. She's 10 years old. She gets an elementary school and middle school education at the orphanage. And then after she completes what is essentially the equivalent of her 8th grade courses, she has to stop attending school. The girls at the orphanage are being trained to become housemaids, like specifically homekeepers.
I mean, okay.
The boys get to go to the high school in the town, in the
Okay,
village
well,
that they're
never
in.
mind.
My own grandmother
Yeah.
had to stop going to school after her 8th grade year. Because we call this woman Dr. Ruth, obviously that's not the last schooling that she'll get.
Yes.
And it was one of those moments too early on in my research where I was like, oh, my grandmother also went back to school later once she finally had the opportunity to and pursued as much education as she wanted.
Nice.
For Dr. Ruth,
That's wild.
here's this really interesting kind of combination that's going on. First, when she was a child, her father always preached education and was like, they can never take away learning from you. Like, you always will have the ability to learn.
Yeah.
And so for her, learning makes her feel closer to her father
dad,
and her
yeah.
family because her family can still write her letters. Like, when she got on the train, like, it's not like her
was about to
mother
ask
and
that,
grandmother
yeah.
were arrested. She is able to continue to write to her family, even though they're in different countries.
Yeah.
And so she's talking about her studies and things. By the time she gets to her 8th grade education, which would be in like 1942-ish, she has to stay at the school.
Yeah.
But she has a boyfriend.
Cute.
And this boyfriend will go off to school during the day, learn, and then come home and teach her everything. In fact,
Shut the fuck up.
decades later,
Shut the fuck up.
they will
Shut
reunite
the fuck up.
in New York City.
Shut up.
And her ex-boyfriend from like high school is clearly married to a different woman, and they invite them into their New York home. They all live in New York. And they tell the story about how
That's so
he
sweet.
would sneak into the girls' dorms with all of his books and explain the concepts to her and then hide under the bed as she would read them because like the headmistress would check sometimes. And he was like, we got away a couple times with like surviving a check because I was literally laying under your mattress as you learned what I had learned in school that day.
That's
You see why I cried a couple times?
And you tried to brush it off like, well, it's actually a funny story.
It's
but
America's leading sex therapist. That is the headline. The headline of this episode is "The Doctor is in."
that's good.
Isn't it?
That's really good.
I know, but also, yeah, the human spirit is literally so unbeatable.
Can I say something controversial?
Always.
My you can decide later.
I did an
if we cut
episode
this.
on sex therapy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're gonna let me publish this later.
Can we just acknowledge the fact that all of our introduction, all of us were introduced in a small way to romance novels from the Diary of Anne Frank. Do you remember that?
No.
She had a boyfriend and when they were in hiding.
Was that your rom-com like moment of discovery?
I don't know, but I remember being like, I would read more books. I remember like being actually really invested in this book because I was like, where does this relationship go? Obviously nowhere good, but like,
Right.
but like because there's like all these little like touches in between like their family
you and I
being there.
had very different experiences with that.
Yeah.
Because I remember reading that at the time and thinking, I get why Anne Frank has a crush on him, and I got to keep that a secret.
Oh, see, I
And
was
so
like, I get
was
it.
not something that I was like,
And I feel
able
weird
to
about the
explore.
fact that I get it
No
because
boy
this
was coming to my bedroom at night and then hiding under
Yeah.
my bed as I read the books to avoid the headmistress.
that's so wholesome.
But I want you to remember this rom-com
Yeah.
moment for later on
Okay.
in this story, okay?
yeah.
So education's super important to her. She writes to her parents. She talks about jumping off the high dive when she's 13 years old,
Wow.
right? And like choosing to be brave. She talks about her Hanukkah parties and like the family that she forms there.
Cute.
Leaving. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. So learning clearly helped her feel closer to her father. And I actually think that that connection might be what helped later in her life her step so comfortably into sex education advocacy. You'll find out in a little bit.
Yeah.
She had a call-in talk show at one point, and she would just speak openly, and she'd ask questions, and she'd be like, okay, here's what I think you should do about what's going on. And her advocacy around the importance of being educated in this part of your life, I think is tied to a deep love she has for learning. And I think a big part of that love is her love for her father. I know.
That's so wholesome.
Because learning clearly did help her feel connected to her father, even though she is sent to the orphanage at the age of 10 in 1939. And she and her parents, her mom and her grandmother specifically, will continue to write for years until the letters mysteriously stop arriving in October of 1941.
How old is she?
At the time in 1941,
Yeah.
she is maybe 12 or 13. She's actually 12 in 1941.
Yikes.
Since the Nazis kept incredible records of their atrocities, including who was transported where and when, we know at the time is that Ruth's parents in October of 1941 were sent to the Lodz Jewish ghetto in Poland, where they were obviously not permitted to send letters because the Lodz ghetto was essentially an open-air prison that the Nazis ran.
Yeah.
Trigger warning now, probably plus 1 to 2 minutes for mentions of parental loss. Historical records indicate that her mother and grandmother were murdered as part of the Holocaust in the Lodz ghetto in 1942, though some of that is assumed.
Yeah.
Her mother's death does not have a specific date and lists only that she disappeared and is presumed murdered. The historical record of her father indicates that he was murdered at the Nazi death camp Auschwitz in 1942. Ruth is only 13 when her parents die, though she does not know it at the time.
Yeah.
She wrote in her journal, quote, "It has been over 2 years since I've last heard from my parents. I wish I could relive the days I had with them. I know I cannot lose hope, but I fear I will never see my parents again." Dr. Ruth Westheimer will finally get confirmation of her parents' death when she is almost 90 years old.
Shut the fuck up.
When she visits the Israeli Holocaust Memorial Museum in 2018. And this is then captured in the documentary. A volunteer sits down with her and opens up the computer and goes through the historical records and tells her. And obviously she knew like before that visit, but they capture on camera like
her reaction.
They capture on camera her hearing the day. Like they capture on camera basically her knowing exactly when in her life they disappeared permanently.
That's always hard, yeah.
And then she had this to say at the time. "Later, when no one is around, I will cry. But German Jews do not cry in public." That was Dr. Ruth in 2018.
Jeez.
For her entire life, she kept a washcloth. Her mother had made it and had stitched her initials in it the day she left Germany for Switzerland. That day on the train platform, at only 10 years old, would be the last time she ever saw her parents. As she would later say, see,
Yeah, what the fuck?
"My parents gave me life twice. Once when I was born, and again when they sent me to Switzerland." She kept that washcloth and every letter from her parents until the day she died.
Crying in the club.
Yeah, I told you, right?
You told me and then you told me not to worry about it, you fucking
I
asshole.
also said at the start, it's like, oh, I should have revisited the start of these notes again.
Yeah.
Because the later on in this episode is really quite funny, but I do forget that it's actually quite sad at the start.
Jesus.
Decades later, she would reconnect with some of the people she went to the orphanage with, including her first boyfriend, all of whom proved to be crucial connections to a childhood lived without her parents. Childhood seeking love and affirmation, emotions that she clearly craved in her childhood and would, fortunately, spend the rest of her life finding, feeling, and helping others discover as well.
Jesus Christ.
More on that when we come back from our break. I actually feel so...
Literally, that last sentence really fucking got me.
Is it the washcloth with her initials or the fact that she kept every letter from her parents until the day she died?
The fact that she was craving love from her parents that she would never get.
Yeah. The fact that she for years continued to hold out hope for her parents, even though the Nazis had executed them.
Well, this has been fun. We made it 86 episodes.
This really is actually so affirming because when I got to this part of my research last night, I was like, I should not have had a glass of wine before I started this. I'm like being over dramatic right now. So seeing you cry at this moment too, I was like, oh, okay, good. That was a healthy reaction.
Yeah, you can get me from found family trope anytime, all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll be back.
Note taken. And we're back. Okay. I wiped my tears. I told myself that I like Grant as a co-host and that I can't kick him off for making me feel emotions.
I always love it because when we come back to these stories, we've legitimately had 5 minutes.
They've had about 5 seconds.
Dun, 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 yeah. And then like we're immediate or a Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah. Or some weird medication.
Yeah. All right. So World War II ends in 1945. And Dr. Ruth, at the time still called Carola, now faces an uncertain future. She wasn't a citizen of Germany, and she had never been a citizen of Switzerland. And so she needs to go somewhere.
Yeah.
She's legitimately stateless. I want to put into perspective timeline for you guys a little bit. 1945, in May of 1945, she's 16. She turns 17 in June. June's her birthday. June is also roughly when she gets on a boat from the port of Marseille in southern France and sails to what is at the time called Palestine. Okay. There is legitimately nowhere else that she kind of can go. Oh. She's not a citizen of like France or Italy or Switzerland. Germany, for like obvious reasons, feels like a non-starter for her as well. Yeah. It's not like a lot of countries are like throwing doors open still. Yeah. And so she immigrates. She immigrates to Israel. Wow. She gets there and she's 17 years old.
That's insane.
With no living relatives.
Like thinking about who I was at 17, I would have not fared well in this situation.
Like you're one, I mean, you had basically no childhood. You had this crazy
You were essentially,
childhood.
At 10, you were thrown into the role of an adult.
Right. But also at the same time, at 10, you are thrown into the role of an adult, but you are also surrounded by children in a way that like a normal childhood would not as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you are literally one of the lost boys from Peter Pan almost. Just with this like responsibility of like mothering, but you're also like, I mean, navigating first relationships for the first time, right?
Yeah.
And it's like everyone is there is kind of in this like survivor mindset. Like she talks a little bit about how they welcomed later on to the war a couple of children who had escaped from Hungary, from like the ghettos that they were locked in or like work camps and things like that. And so they're kind of aware as to what's going on a little bit. And I mean, she certainly understands that the fact that her parents are not writing her letters anymore is deeply, deeply ominous. Yeah. And so there's all of that going on. And then at the same time, it's like, I jumped from the high dive for the first time today, you know? And so she's 17. Yeah. She lands in Israel. It's about to become Israel during the UN partition in 1948. And obviously, hatred towards Germany is high amongst the people she is around. Yeah. And it's decided either by her or kind of for her, that her name Carola, Karola, is too German. So she switches her names. She adopts her middle name, as her first name, Ruth, and puts her, so her full name is Ruth K. Westheimer, makes the Carola, because it's K, her middle name.
Right, okay.
She does this in hopes that her parents are alive and
And
are
they'll
looking
still
for
be able
her,
to find her.
and they'll recognize her. Her maiden name is Siegel, so that they would recognize a Ruth Siegel. Because that's also this huge fear. You're 16 when the war
Yeah,
ends.
like what happens
Right.
if they're still alive? How
and
do
they're
I
looking
find
for
them?
you.
Yeah.
What happens if they're alive and they're looking for you and they get to the orphanage a month after you left? Right? Do you go into Germany? Do you try to find them? And she shares in one of her interviews, she was like, after the war at the orphanage, obviously people stayed there for a little bit as like things
Yeah.
had to get figured out. They would call all of us in every day. And like Jewish relief organizations would read the names of Jews who had survived. And that is who you would listen for. And so she was like, oh, my family was never on any of those lists. Like no one I was related to was ever on any of those lists. And so she decides to immigrate, but she moves with this terrible fear that her parents are looking for her. And
they're
she's
not gonna
getting
find her.
that she's literally getting further away. But what do you do?
Yeah.
And she talks later on in her life about what being forced to make decisions for herself
Yeah.
as a young woman, like how that shaped her
Shaped who
perception
she is,
on femininity, on her own
Yeah.
identity. Like she wasn't granted any of the kind of
She didn't have a matriarch telling her like how she should dress or how she should act or who she should
Exactly.
see or any of that. Like she was making those decisions on her own. And
She's
that's-
not even really ever in a society where like she's being given that opportunity. I mean, at the orphanage, kind of, she takes on an older sister role
Yeah.
to a lot of young people.
Yeah.
But it's still
like
different.
yeah, it's still giving it. Is there a reason that she was not able to stay in Switzerland? Like
She's not a citizen.
so it's just difficult
It's
to
get out.
so Switzerland just like kicks people out after the war.
Yeah, it's, I mean, really kind of complicated situation going on there. Switzerland is a country that was never occupied, didn't necessarily want to play host to a bunch of refugees, right? It was like, go back to the countries that we rescued you from. It's not our job to house you anymore.
So they wouldn't if she had applied for like a visa or like I don't know if that was a thing.
Yeah,
around that
that's
time.
less clear, but
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like that was an option for
That's
her.
why she had to leave.
And I'm
Okay.
saying that only based off of, from the sources that I read, her like deep and documented fear at the time that she was actually getting further away from her parents.
Yeah, because that's what I was saying. Like
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking. Like if I were in that situation, I would have stayed in Switzerland
yeah.
forever.
Right,
like
right.
that's where I would be right now.
This is the
Yeah.
last place they need to look for me.
Yeah, and now I'm gonna start a life here.
Yeah.
So yeah,
She even talks, because obviously from Switzerland to Marseille, she has to take a train. And especially like,
that's got to be the hardest train ride.
well, France, Great Britain, and the United States had captured, by the end of the war, hundreds of thousands of German soldiers as POWs. And so what she actually talks about is being on a train heading towards Marseille, and there's a train heading in the opposite direction, full of those captured German POWs.
She was worried she was.
She was like, did
They
you
could
kill my
be on
parents?
that.
No, she's worried
Oh,
like, are
they're-
you
'cause
the
they're
people
Germans.
that
Okay, yeah,
killed
I'm
my
on
family?
page, yeah.
Yeah, but like, it's like, because like, and this is like, the war's over. There's no way to get justice at this individual level for
And
these
it's also
individuals.
hard to like at this point. There's not the same like understanding of psychology and what some of those POWs probably went through and
Right.
like what their actual beliefs are because like the system was fucked for
Well,
almost everyone in that
and
situation.
the
Not to like
world has
justify.
no,
Yeah.
and the world has truly no playbook
Yeah.
for how to tackle something of this
No.
scale.
Yeah.
For something like this to really kind of happen in this way at all, I mean, obviously war crimes have been happening, but something so systemic at such a large level that was so deeply embedded into the state, like mechanisms of a country. I mean, I think today, with our modern morals and knowledge, we would struggle to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And so she moves to Palestine in 1945. Basically, right away, she's 17. She has nothing else to do. In Israel, she is young. And a lot of the people there are also young. A lot of them are orphans. A lot of them are young people that had managed to escape and like had joined the war. Like you are basically flirting with a lot of former soldiers, right? Who had like signed up to enlist as a way
Right.
of like payback, or people who had hidden, or people who had fled. And a lot of these, I mean, every single person that she interacts with has lost somebody in the
Yeah.
Holocaust.
Yes.
And a lot of people are exactly like her, where they lost everybody. And so she's young, no real connections to anything. Her life has been paused and then dramatically unpaused with the end of the war. And there's a lot of other hot young people who are like let's live for literally this exact moment right here. And so she
Spicy.
talks, yes. And so she talks about how
I can see how she became a sex therapist. The links are connected. I was like, how do we get from Holocaust to sex therapist? I'm very confused and very worried.
Yeah.
Now it makes
This
sense.
is it.
It makes sense. It was Grant when we were in London.
oh, people in London are gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every time we walked into any store, Grant was like, oh my God.
Get me
And I
outta
was
here.
like, Jesus Christ,
Well,
Grant,
Maia's
I'm
married, so
trying
she
to
can't
buy
see.
a goddamn I'm trying
Get
to
that
buy
notebook. I want his number.
a fucking bottle opener keychain to piss off Casey.
I'm going to just now read from my direct notes. I've done so much research that I'm just like kind of, for the first time, just bullet pointing this
Yeah.
with you. But this I want to get word for word. Okay. So she's 17. She's young. And a lot of the people there are orphans as well. She would go on to share this story in the documentary, Ask Dr. Ruth, that the first guy she ever hooked up with, like all the way,
Ooh.
was the older brother of her then current boyfriend, an icon.
Wow.
She said, he was a soldier. And my current boyfriend, we hadn't done anything more than just hand holding and kissing. So I told him it was over, and I felt all right about that. And then she said this in a New York Times
Yeah.
interview in 2021. She goes, quote, I had sexual intercourse on a starry night in a haystack without contraception. I'm not happy about that. But I know much better now. And so does everyone who listens to my radio program.
Wait, I love her.
And then the man leaves her. And that's bad already.
I saw that coming.
Sure.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and
Yeah.
unpack that a little bit more. A person with deep
Deep, like abandonment issues. Yeah, that's
and
rough.
not because she like just can't get over anything, but because every single person in her life is gone.
Gone. Yeah.
Is gone. And she spent 7 years in a place where she was called an orphan and was required to take care of other people's children.
Mm-hmm.
And she left her boyfriend for him.
I mean, fair. Fair.
Then in 1948, the thing I'm about to say to you next is going to shock you. Then in 1948, the United Nations partitions the region known as Palestine into two states, Palestine and the state of Israel.
Right.
As a result of that decision, a civil war erupts.
Yep.
Ruth, then now 20, 19, trains as a sniper.
What?
Uh-huh.
That's fucking badass.
It's like, how do I even work this into this woman's like story?
That's insane.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I'm not saying anything about obviously the politics of this region.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is this one individual woman's journey
Is crazy.
Right. And 3 years earlier was mending clothes, wondering if the war was ever going to end in the Alps of Switzerland.
Right.
And now she is a sniper in the region of Palestine or Israel, depending on who you ask and where it is at the
That
time.
is such an unpredictable timeline.
Yeah. I think you even say at one point, this woman lives more life in 20 years than most of us do
In
in
an
a
entire
lifetime.
entire lifetime. Yeah.
Okay, so she trains as a sniper. Of this experience, she said, quote, I never killed anybody, but I know how to throw a hand grenade and how to shoot. She is
Wow.
classified as an ace sniper
Oh my gosh.
and learned how to assemble a rifle in the dark. When she was 90 years old, she demonstrated that she could still put together a Sten gun with her eyes closed and blindfolded.
What?
Yeah. And so then in 1948, as this war erupts, it's actually June 4th, 1948. It is the night of her 20th birthday. Her job assignment, and one of the reasons why she never actually had to kill anyone in action, at least
Yeah.
according to her, is that she would be stationed as a sniper on a roof
Right.
above like a vehicle checkpoint. And her goal was just to like be like this off camera
On the lookout, yeah.
as other soldiers like ran the post or whatever.
Why we have snipers everywhere
Right,
now.
right,
Yeah.
right. And so she comes home to her apartment in Jerusalem, and she hears the air raid sirens go off. So she runs to the bomb shelter, and a shell explodes right beside her, and two women who are standing right next to her die, and she is horrifically injured in the experience. She is immediately taken to a hospital.
Yeah.
They are afraid they're going to have to amputate both of her feet, but they keep them.
Yeah.
She survives. And over the next several weeks will be nursed back to health. She shares it in the documentary. She goes, there was a very attractive
I was going to say, there's a trope here. There's a trope here.
She goes, there was this very attractive
There's
nurse.
enemies to lovers. There is a childhood friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so far. I'm waiting for one bedroom in the inn. Shut up.
You're just going to enjoy the story. You're just going to enjoy this fascinating woman that I get to talk to you about.
I'm happy
the one that
it's
you were like,
less
what are you doing this,
sad.
Grant? So she, it was either a nurse or a doctor, but it was someone who worked at the hospital. And she pretended that she couldn't feed herself. She was like, my arms worked just fine. But I pretend. Go ahead.
Grant,
Yeah,
I don't know
go ahead.
anything else about this woman. I just know.
I told you could root for her. It all goes better.
I fucking love her. That's insane. Even if she hadn't gone through what she'd gone through, which is insane in its own, like, on its own. The fact that she sat in a hospital and and saw this attractive person and was like, oh no,
and was
my arms don't work.
No doubt reading and cross-stitching and writing in between meals, but then pretending she had this like mental blockage to feeding herself. She got this nurse / doctor to feed her, and then she said, he fed me three times a day, and I had a speedy recovery for how severe my injuries were. And then she had this to say how much later in her life.
Oh my gosh.
I'm incredibly grateful to have survived the experience and that I still have use of my legs today. That I can ski, that I can water ski, that I can ice skate.
She can water ski? I can't water ski.
That I can ski, that I can water ski, that I can skate, and that I can dance all night if I find a good partner.
Grant!
Yeah.
The way I want this, like in the same way Catholics have a picture of like the Saint Mary, I want a picture of
Ruth
her
Westheimer,
on my wall
it would not
with like
be
a glowing
unusual.
halo behind her.
I think Dr. Ruth would appreciate it. Good.
I'm going to make that and post it on Etsy. Like I have, yeah.
So after having lived all of this, at 22, she gets married in 1950 to a man by the name of, it's coming later, David Bar Hadim. She marries him in 1950 when she's 22 years old.
Wow.
And then the next year, in 1951, David's like, guess what, Ruth? And it's just Ruth. It's not doctor yet. It's just Ruth.
Yeah.
He goes, guess what, Ruth? We're moving to Paris so I can go to medical school. And they show a picture of David, and this man is gorgeous.
Ruth did it.
I'd go to North Dakota for medical school with David. North Dakota. No offense to our North Dakota listeners, but you understand. I'm from Nebraska. We speak the same language. And so she.
And that language is potato.
Yeah. And you're welcome for it.
Yeah,
by the way.
I know.
And so she's like, "What? Well, I mean, I guess if we have to, I guess I'll go to Paris.
I guess I'll follow you to the most romantic city in the world."
And so her and David moved to Paris, and he goes to medical school. And Paris, it's 1951, so it's 6 years after the war is done. Paris is now running programs for these young adults whose lives were interrupted by the war to try to kind of like get them back on track. And so that way they can like be productive members of society.
Yeah.
And so in Paris, she's like helping out like a kindergarten, and she's like taking care of kids to like kind of help support herself. And then she sees this advertisement, and it's, if you are an adult who did not get the chance to go to high school because of the war, you can take classes at this university. And so she goes, hell yeah.
Yeah.
And so she signs up
your
for
tits
that.
out.
Exactly. Dr. Ruth, yeah. And so she goes and she shows the story. She goes, I would walk into these big lecture halls and I'd ask one of the big, strong men. Feels like she's kind of always looking for big, strong men to
help her with things that she could probably, she knows she can do herself.
Well, and also she's 4'7", so like regularly does need help with things.
Oh my God, she's tiny.
Yes, and so she would have them put her on a windowsill at the front of class so she could see the professor and she would take her notes.
Hot again?
No, for reals, yes. This is a woman
This woman this woman would thrive in a bar today.
Yes, agreed. I think part of it is that she's like, I've been an adult for so long, but I finally have an adult body that I'm playing for keeps. Like
I think she's just like so confident in herself.
Yeah.
She's not afraid to do the things that other women might be like, I want to do that, but I'm like, what if he doesn't want to? What if he says no? And she's just like, I want this to happen, so I'm going to ask.
She has literally survived so much already.
Yeah.
And is so clearly aware of her luck to having survived that to be nervous just doesn't even seem to occur to her.
She's also never had like that voice in her head, the like older generations telling her like, well, don't show your shoulders, don't like do this, don't dress this way, don't act like this.
And it's Paris after the war, so like people are kind of coming out.
Paris.
And it's Paris, right?
It's Paris.
So trouble in Paris. David comes to her and he's like, turns out I'm not smart.
Turns out I gave all my money to Victor Lustig to buy the Eiffel Tower.
I've been partying with Victor Hugo too much and I got to get out of here. And he's like, you coming, Ruth? And she's like, I'm kind of really liking Paris. I'm in school.
I'm going to stay here.
I completely understand your decision to drop out and to move back to Israel. I'm going to stay though. And David's like, fair. It's been a good run for 6 years. Let's get a divorce. And she was like, well, if you insist. And then 9 months later, she remarries a man that I think she had been seeing on the side.
Ooh, but she won't admit that now.
Wouldn't admit it now, correct. That's entirely just hyperbole, but I'm looking at timelines specifically. Here's what I wrote. She loved learning and didn't want to give it up. So when her first husband, David, didn't want to finish medical school and wanted to move back, she didn't.
Wait, can I interrupt
Yeah,
you?
of course.
Did I tell you? I told you about Maddie going to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
She went to Europe. My dear friend Maddie, a friend of the podcast, she's never been on, but I love her so much. She took a solo trip to Europe pretty recently, and she was in Paris for a good long while. And I texted her, and I had no idea about the trip to Paris. So I was like, do you want to come over tonight? And she was like, I'm in Paris. And I was like, okay, tell me more about why you're in Paris, because now I'm concerned. And anyway, so we talked about what she was doing in Paris. I sent her the whole list of everywhere Tyler and I had gone and like recommendations for her last day in Paris before she went to Amsterdam. And then she sends me this. She went specifically to Maison de Victor Hugo just to get this picture for us.
I love her.
I know.
Good for her. I hope she has some oranges and kirsch tonight in a really weird way. Listen to our Les Miserables episode if you would like to know more about this. Yeah. So Maddie's not the only one having a great time in Paris. Do you know who else is? Ruth.
Yeah.
Ruth Siegel is having a great time. David moves back to...
Do they divorce? Or
do they divorce.
Okay.
I know that's a theme in some of my episodes.
Well, yeah.
But it's a legally recognized divorce.
Yeah.
And it needs to be so that way she can marry Dan Boomer.
Dan?
Bommer. No, you don't understand. If you thought David was fine, Dan is fine.
I can't handle the name. It's like marrying a Chad.
Right. He's something. But they get married because, as Dr. Ruth said, quote, when you're pregnant, you get married.
Yep.
And so they get married in like 1956, I think. Where's the dates? Why is this the one part of my notes that I do not have like exact dates in? Like 1953, 54, 55 is the era that we're in right now. So she gets pregnant during that time. And so they get married. Okay, so I have a devastating quote. Are you ready?
No.
Okay. So this is from Dr. Ruth. Again, at the time, just Ruth. Having been raised without any family around and then just continuing to not have any family around, to have that gorgeous baby was just fantastic, because when her baby is born, it's the first blood relative she's been able to hold since she was 10.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, sorry. I told you it was devastating.
Yeah.
And so she has this baby, and then she also gets, let's not call it, I put it in my notes. She has a gorgeous baby. She has a hot husband. She lives in Paris. And suddenly she has $1,500, give or take, kind of American money. See, the German government in 1955 was like, hi, if your high school education was cut short because of the Holocaust, here's 5,000 Reichmarks, which
It was like
translation's weird.
in COVID when they were like,
Yeah.
here's however much money they gave us.
100%. They're like, it isn't everything, but like maybe this can help jumpstart like a career or whatever. And for Ruth Westheimer, known as Ruth Siegel or Ruth Boomer at the time,
Boomer.
she's like, perfect, amazing. I'm going to go ahead and cash this in for 3 tickets to America. And they set sail for the United States in 1956.
Wow.
She boards the boat. They are on the boat for like a week. And
This
then,
is still before my parents were born.
Yes.
This is crazy.
And then before they dock, as
Yeah.
they approach New York City, she shares this. They told us we weren't allowed onto the upper decks because that was for first class passengers, but I was not going to be denied seeing the Statue of Liberty.
That is your mom.
Yeah. Oh, and I have a Patreon story to tell you about one of my students.
That's also Lydia.
Yes. And so she goes, and so Dan and I snuck up to the top of the ship and spent the night, and we saw the Statue of Liberty as we pulled into New York City, and I knew I was home.
This is so romantic.
I know. And it's going to get more romantic.
Do they divorce?
Of course they do.
Okay.
They get to New York.
I just
and
needed to be
they're like-
realistic.
They're like, oh, this is maybe not going to work out. Maybe we were both hot and in our 20s and then we had a baby, but now we're here and maybe this isn't going to
And
work
we can
out.
divorce now.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Dr. Ruth said, and I quote, we had this really old car at the time, so I made him a deal. You take the car, I'll take the baby.
Shut up. That's
and
so
that's what
funny.
she does. She gets this tiny little like 0-bedroom studio apartment. She cleans homes for less than $1 an hour, and she needs to learn English.
Yeah.
She knows German and she
Oh
knows
my
Hebrew.
God. That's
She doesn't know
totally gone
English.
over my head.
So she reads English rom-coms and romance novels to learn how to speak and read English.
This woman is my icon.
Yes.
This woman is everything.
We are going to have to spend the rest of our life to try to approach these levels
We're
of
never
coolness.
going to.
No, absolutely not.
She's younger than both of us.
Correct. She's absolutely she is. She's a mother, single mother, having honestly in the like interview a great time. She's like, of course I was working like so hard, like all the time.
Yeah.
But like this was a woman who was clearly every single day aware of how much of a gift her lived life was in that exact moment. She, for the first time in 15 years, has a blood relative who she gets to see every
day.
single day. And she is in New York City, a city full of Jewish people and immigrants and people who don't speak English. And she was going to make her run at it. And that starts with her getting her master's in sociology from the New School in New York City. Because even though she doesn't have a high school diploma, she actually leaves Paris with like an undergraduate in like human psychology. And so she applies to the New School, and then she applies to several Jewish organizations to help her with like housing and childcare. And she gets her master's in sociology from the New School. She
is both younger than me and more educated than me.
Correct.
That's insane.
She gets an undergraduate, a master's, and a doctorate without ever fully and formally receiving a high school diploma.
Wow.
She enrolls in the master's program. She works nights. Jewish organizations help provide with childcare. And then she shares a story. She hosts these hopping parties in her house because she's still an adult. She's still young. And now she's like surrounded by these interesting, educated people. She goes, I'd take all of our guests' coats and I'd pile them up on our one shared bed in this one bedroom. And I would put my precious little girl to sleep on that pile of coats. And then we would just have fun. And like we were all just together. And it was just her and her daughter in this one bedroom apartment as they were making it all happen, baby.
A single mom
Who works two jobs, who loved her kid and never stopped. With gentle hands and the heart of a fighter. She's a survivor.
I think Reba wrote this song after this.
I'm finally doing my Reba episode, and it's America's foremost sex therapist. She becomes a sex therapist. You forget that in the backstory.
I do. But suddenly, I'm glad that you mentioned that at the beginning, because otherwise all of this would be like increasingly more uncomfortable for me as I'm like, Grant, are you sure? Like, yeah. It's beautiful. I love everything about this. She is living in like all of the fucking Fitzgerald novels and
she is. She's a
like,
fictionalized character.
Yes. Yeah.
Because also,
I would read a fictional book about her.
by the time she is like approaching the end of her 20s and start of her 30s, she's been married twice, lived in 4 different countries, 5, if you count her childhood as well. She graduates, and in the 1960s, she began to work at Planned Parenthood in East
Shut the
Harlem.
fuck up. I love this woman.
And in nights, she'll teach high school graduates how to become family planning counselors. And this is actually really important work because it's an advanced degree you can get without having to go to a formal school, giving these people a job you can do in the office that has like health insurance and like a 401k and like is an absolute career advancement moment for these
around
people.
what year is this?
1960s, early
That's
1960s.
insane.
Abortion is largely illegal in most of this country too.
That's just wild.
And so not only is she spreading the word about like contraception, but she's helping teach people to spread that word. And in teaching these people how to spread that word, she is giving them more lucrative career options than they might otherwise have. So she's working in East Harlem. She's working for Planned Parenthood. She's spreading the good word, then launches herself into a doctorate program at Columbia University.
At Columbia?
Where imagine the essay she would write for her admittance.
Super fair. Super fair.
Where she got her doctorate of education and family life services. And after she got her doctorate, she realized she didn't actually still know enough to answer the questions some people would ask her in private as like a family planning counselor. And so she sought out information and began to work under Helen Singer Kaplan, the founder and a leader of the sex therapist movement.
Yeah.
For her, the subject just never seemed taboo in the first place.
She's a lifelong learner.
Like literally, literally, yes.
Yeah.
Her upbringing as an orphan taught her the importance of being touched and held. Her family wasn't there to literally hold her as a child, so she knew firsthand the power of physical connection between two people. It was during this time that she met her third and final husband, Fred Westheimer, on a ski trip. So here's how the story goes.
Oh my God, I'm not ready for how romantic this is going to be.
You really aren't. She is on a ski trip in upstate New York.
Okay.
And instead of having like chair lifts, it's just a T-bar.
The T-bar, yeah. Which is archaic, by the way.
Well, it's the 60s.
I'm just saying, if you're ever on a ski slope and they're like, the only way you can get up there is a T-bar, don't go.
Right.
Don't go. Unless you're like Casey and like fucking love that shit. There's no need.
So this T-bar requires 2 people, right? To be on either side
balanced,
of it. Because basically it's a T-bar, so it's like a wooden T, and you basically put the like cross part like at your buttocks
and then
or your
the
back.
top of the T, just to explain for those of you who don't know, so it's a T that's upside down, right? And so on either side of like what would be the top of the T, you're sitting, and then the top of the T or the bottom of the T, if you're writing it, the top of the T is connected to like a pulley system kind of that takes you up the mountain. So you're dragged up without you having to do the work.
And so her friend, like her big ski group, pairs her up with someone. Remember, she's 4'7", who's way too tall for her. Oh, no. And she goes, I can't do that. And she looks across the group and she sees this shorter man, and she goes, him, I'll ride up with him. And on their very first ski ride up, she talks to him and she thinks to herself, I'm going to marry him. I love him. And she has a daughter. And Fred meets her daughter and loves her instantly and basically adopts her as soon as they are married, and they get married instantly, and they move to this home in Manhattan, this apartment where she will spend the rest of her life.
My God. See, I never want to have kids, but like the trope of like being a single mom and like meeting someone that then just immediately connects with your child and is not judging you for having a child and that kind of stuff. That is like, it's not smut. It's just romantic and like, wow.
Right. And come the 1960s when she meets him, she's
60s?
in her 30s, twice married, survivor of war, 2.
Like people were still fighting segregation at this point.
Right. You can't send contraception through the mail at this time. And Fred will be her third husband. She already has a child, and he just loves her. Just loves her instantly. And supports her
this
her
is romantic
entire life.
Today, but to remember that it's in the 60s, it's crazy.
Because
it's wild.
Fred's just a quiet, bookish engineer who loves her fire and just loves her so much. And so they move into this apartment together in this immigrant community in Manhattan, and they get an apartment, and she's immediately pregnant with their second kid, and life's just gorgeous. And for Ruth, this could be it. She'll work in her community centers with her doctorate. She'll teach and she'll educate, and she'll take care of this beautiful family that she never had as a kid, and she'll just be happy forever. And that could probably be enough for Ruth.
Grant's about to start crying.
I
again.
know.
I just want, for those of you on the audio platform, you can't see, or even on the video, you might not be able to see.
Because here's what I fucking wrote. Okay.
Oh, Jesus.
The incredible stuff. The stuff how she's like, this is stuff that she's famous for. How an old lady who was 4'7" with a thick German accent became America's leading sex therapist. That stuff that we teased out at the beginning, that's the next section. But before we do that, I wanted to say this. Dr. Ruth Westheimer had every reason in the world to be mad, mean, and angry. It had tried to kill her multiple times. She had raised without the love of her parents. She bounced around countries, regularly had to survive on her own devices. Time and again was let down by people. There was no reason this short immigrant in America should be so full of love. And yet she was, because she chose that. Because she knew that's what her parents would want her to choose.
Jesus fucking Christ.
I know. I'm crying again. I'm crying again.
I'm unwell.
I know. Because we're about to, the audio clips I have pulled for like 6 minutes from now. Crazy. So this section is literally called From Survivor to Star. Now, the origin story, a little blurred. I got 2 different versions of the origin story. But here's what you need to know. The year is 1981. We are a year into the Reagan administration.
And the cheese is crazy.
There's a huge cheese problem, actually. And Ruth Westheimer, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, is 53 years old. Mm-hmm. Now, there's 2 stories at play here, but there is one singular truth in both of them. In order to continue to be a recognized, like, published radio station.
Yes.
Radio stations in the 80s had to provide airtime for educational content.
Okay.
That was a requirement with their deal with the FCC.
Right.
You have to provide educational content. Usually they shoved it at the lowest listening times anyways. Like, for instance, midnight at Sunday.
Yes.
The 2 stories go, either radio station WYNY reached out to Cornell Medical University asking for someone to give a topic on anything, and no one volunteered but Ruth. Or a different version that I read in one of her obituaries, she has passed, but lives a beautiful life, is that...
That's the saddest thing you've said so far.
It's not, but that's kind of...
Okay.
I have weeped many times.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay. So anyway,
I need to quit.
That she basically gives the speech as part of working at Cornell Medical University, or Cornell Medical School. She gives a speech to broadcasters basically being like, you need to take greater social responsibility on advertising sexual education to the young people that listen to your stations.
Yeah. And
she's so compelling in that speech that like a radio publisher like approaches her and was like, do you want to fill in this like educational spot? And she says yes. She says, sure, why not?
Wow.
So Dr. Westheimer steps in and runs a 15-minute segment that airs Sunday at midnight.
Oh my gosh.
Titled Sexually Speaking, which is an incredible name.
That's...
yes.
That could be the title.
Correct. We'll talk, because potentially.
Yeah.
Like, yes.
I see why it has the word sex in it. You're right.
Yeah, it's actually a really big part. Of
yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. The doctor's in is maybe more
generic.
Yeah, makes a little bit more sense.
It immediately is huge. It's a huge success. Like, less than a year, Sexually Speaking has over 250,000 listeners. And the radio station, because it's their Sunday midnight broadcasting system, is doing, not figuratively, literally zero promotion. It has 500,000 listeners in a just New York area radio base. Like, it's not syndicated anywhere, through word of mouth alone.
Oh my gosh.
One of the initial producers there says, so they were like filming, I think, at Rockefeller, which is NBC, right? Like the Rockefeller station.
Yes, yeah.
And they go, what's really interesting is because obviously a lot of the stuff gets pre-recorded and then you air it at its like scheduled time.
Yeah.
And if you are in the building, you can actually kind of dial in and listen to any station recording in the moment.
Yeah.
It's not like you can talk or anything, but you can hear.
You can hear it, yeah.
And we found out pretty quickly that when Dr. Ruth came in to record her stuff,
People were tuning in.
like work was stopping at Rockefeller Center for people to listen in, and it immediately takes off and it becomes this massive success and it builds on itself.
Oh my gosh.
So it quickly garners 250,000 listeners. Dr. Ruth joked at the time. So it takes off from 0 to 250,000. They start to advertise it. It's huge. They take it, they move it from 15 minutes to like 30 minutes to an hour, and they move it from midnight to Sunday at 10 p.m., which is actually a huge listener
because
time zone.
like on the East Coast, that's what, like 7 or something?
No, so it's 10 p.m. in New York.
Yeah.
But
on the West Coast.
Yeah,
is what
it's
I said,
7. But she jokes that 10 p.m. on the West Coast was chosen because it was roughly around those time that people in the Hamptons would get into their cars to drive into the city for work on Monday. And they would listen to Dr. Ruth Westheimer and Sexually Speaking. Sexually Speaking will run for a decade. When the radio station, it's a radio program, when the radio station offers merch, the shirts say, "Sex on Sunday, you bet." And they sell thousands in 1982. And she's in part famous for her catchphrase. I want you to guess what Dr. Ruth Westheimer coins as her catchphrase at the age of 55 with a thick German accent.
Get your tits out. No.
You're not super far. You will recognize it.
Okay. I have no idea.
I'm going to take a sip. I want you to really kind of percolate for a second. And I'm back.
Like, be confident. I don't know.
Get some.
Shut
up. Get some is a 55-year-old Holocaust survivor who, on her third husband and 2 children, takes over a midnight radio station to spread the importance of safe sex. And she coins the phrase "get some" as a sex-positive approach to physical intimacy.
I have never even considered where that comes from.
Because it's so deeply ingrained in our culture at this point. It's so ingrained that it actually isn't even sexual anymore.
No, it's not.
Because that's how mainstream Dr. Ruth Westheimer is. And so that way when you looked at me like a deer in the headlights panicked at the start of this episode where you were like, "Grant, are you sure you want to do this?" I was like,
Grant's a public school teacher. Like, should you be talking about this?
I was like, yes, I do. I'm
glad that you could see that in my face.
100%.
Sometimes Casey doesn't see that in my face, and we're working on it.
Described as, quote, Grandma Freud and...
Grandma Freud?
Yes.
Shut up. That's so funny. How old was she?
At this time, 55, 56, 50.
Okay.
It runs for a decade. So when she starts it at 53, when she hits the 90s, she's 63.
Here's the thing, guys. Michelle Yeoh started acting, I think in her 40s, 50s?
It's never too late.
And she started this radio program at 50s. Granted, there's a lot of work going up to this, but like, it's never too late to start something.
Correct. It's never too late to start something if you're authentic.
To try something.
If you're non-judgmental, if you're earnest, if you're like, here's what I know.
Go to a beginner class.
Yeah.
Like, even if you're surrounded by 12-year-olds.
Right.
Like,
or experts.
It doesn't matter.
Yes. Okay. So, described as Grandma Freud and the Sister Wendy of sexuality, Westheimer helped revolutionize talk about sex and sexual. This part's pulled straight from Wikipedia. Most of this stuff has been my own writing or certain quips, but I couldn't do better than this.
Yeah.
So credit where credit's due. This comes from Wikipedia because it was like, why even bother trying to reword this?
Yeah.
Westheimer helped revolutionize talk about sex and sexuality on the radio and television, advocating for speaking openly about sexual issues. She fielded questions from women who did not have orgasms to the best time of the day to have sex, which was the morning.
Really?
To men with premature ejaculation, to foreplay, to oral sex, to sexual fantasies. Quote, embrace them. Also, quote, if you want to believe the whole football team is in bed with you, that's fine. She talked openly about masturbation, erections. She talked about sexual positions and the G-spot. She stressed that, quote, anything 2 consenting adults do in the privacy of their bedroom or living room or kitchen floor is all right with me. She spoke out against engaging in any sexual activity under pressure.
Yes.
She educated her listeners about sexually transmitted diseases and spoke out strongly in favor of having sex, in favor of contraception being used, in favor of the ability of abortion as an aid for contraception failures, in favor of sex within relationships rather than one-night stands, in favor of funding Planned Parenthood, and in favor of research on HIV/AIDS. She became known for giving serious advice while being candid and funny, warm and cheerful, and respectful, with her tagline, "Get some."
I am in love with
I
this
know.
woman.
So now we have a couple of clips from her show.
I'm not okay.
Because it starts off as a radio program where it goes like 15, 30 minutes, and then it's an hour long. And then they're like, let's get this tiny German Jewish immigrant woman on television. And they do. And she shines. So she does two things. She, one, has her own show, right? Like literally called Ask Dr. Ruth, where literally thousands of people
I'm about
would
to
call
binge
in to watch
any
this.
clip of this I can find
Correct.
on YouTube.
But then she would also go on late night television shows and get like young David Letterman,
Oh my
young
God.
Johnny Carson. She worked long enough to get young Conan O'Brien to say words like blue balls and erection and penis and female orgasm. In fact, in one incredible interview from the 90s with Conan O'Brien,
Conan O'Brien is like 8 feet tall, I'm pretty sure.
correct.
Like,
She goes after Conan O'Brien over her frustration that there is a term for when men have not reached sexual completion, and that's blue balls, and that there isn't a term for when women do, and that she has coined her own phrase for it and would like others to use it, and then on regular ass like late night television uses the word lips, and I will let you fill in what might be in front of it there. That was the line I decided to draw. I was like, I can say half of this phrase. And this, there's 100% about to be a commercial. Oh, there's not. Okay, so this clip, and I'm excited because you're going to get a chance to see her for the first time. Dr. Ruth discusses sexual perfectionism with a cab driver.
you want me to hold it?
Hold it up to the microphone,
Yeah, I
though.
can.
It's only like a minute and a half long clip. From,
You know, I hear things. I'm a New York City cab
I need you to
driver.
pause
I
it
got
real
my
quick
own
for a
cab, and
second. Because they're not going to be able to see it if it's just the audio platform. I won't do this a lot, but I do need to describe this person. Because you're like, oh, like maybe it's a bunch of like, you know, the 80s, there was a counterculture. Maybe it's a bunch of like free thinking hippies and like liberals and like college students. And it's all like this kind of big inside joke.
This man
and she's
is wearing the Jim Jones glasses.
like, I fully believe that there is active grease on his hands. Like, he reminds me of some of my like uncles who farm who say 3 words a year. Like,
He
this
would
is-
also, like, personality-wise, yes.
Yeah.
Today, if he dressed like this, he would be an icon.
Yeah. Oh, he'd be
Yes.
back in style, but it's the 80s. So
Yes.
it's just, you know, he's
just a style.
He's a
Yeah.
grown man. And what he's about to talk about, I think is really interesting too. In case you don't hear it, I'll shut up after I say this. He says, as a cab driver, I just hear people's unfiltered thoughts. And now he's talking
That's
to
the
Dr.
Uber
Ruth.
drivers
Yes.
today.
Anyways,
the
good luck.
number of drunk conversations I've had with Uber drivers is insane. It drives Casey insane. Also, sorry.
You're good.
One more time. I think this might be the first time I'm saying this on this, like, for the full podcast. I have been talking lightly with my parents, just like starting to reconnect that relationship. My mom today sent me, I had asked if they had seen Wicked. She responded, and then she sent like, by the way, I think you would be great on this television show. And it's an HBO show that's like, it's like a dating show, but for just friends. Like, so basically you try and make friends with someone, and then you do like Friends, like the TV show Friends competitions.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that there's an episode where Rachel and Monica are competing against Joey and Chandler.
Yeah, the trivia thing.
On how well
For the
you know.
apartment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically you like, I think from what I understood from the article that she sent me, it was like, you try and make friends with someone so hard that you can win that competition.
Right.
And my mom was like, you should do this.
It's insane that she thinks you'd be good at it, because I would. I mean, it's a walk for me. Like, I am winning it instantly.
You and I
together.
kill.
You're hot. I'm funny.
Defying gravity. Anyway.
Dr. Ruth talks.
Unlimited.
Dr.
Sorry,
Ruth talks
one
to
more-
a cab driver.
One more little Easter egg from Wicked.
They're all plus 15 right now as we yap. I want to hear it though.
I can't remember the tune though. Unlimited. When she says unlimited.
Unlimited. My future
is unlimited. Okay, that unlimited.
Please don't keep that part in.
I'm gonna.
Go ahead.
Unlimited is the same like chord progression and intervals as somewhere over.
Just felt really good to say that right before.
Unlimited. Somewhere over. Anyway, sorry. Here's that clip Grant told me to play like a minute
Ruth
ago.
Talks about sex perfectionism to a cab driver.
Yeah, hello, Dr. Ruth. I hear things. I'm a New York City cab driver. I got my own cab, and I hear people in the cab. When I drive my cab, I don't exist.
Yeah.
I'm part of the machinery.
And they probably tell you all of their problems.
Well,
right?
I hear all. I'm like
Even
you, but
sexual
only
problems.
I'm getting paid behind the wheel doing it. And I found out that sexuality perfection is a myth. It does not exist, and people that try to really want to be exceptional sexually, they're putting a lot of heat on themselves.
But I want to tell you something. Sexuality is kind of virtuoso, or of being
No, that's a lot of baloney. That's a lot of nonsense. What I'm trying to say is that men are not born lovers. They're taught to be lovers, and most men are taught to be lovers by women.
Right. Do you mind if the partner that you have, or your wife, or whoever it is, takes your hand and shows you how she
I
needs
love
to
it.
live? You love it.
I love it.
I hope that everybody out there in this whole world now.
Everything I ever learned about making love to a woman
She's
was
so
from women.
fucking cute.
That's great. Thank you very
Yes.
much. I agree with you.
And then she has this like cute little laugh, and then she claps
Oh
in
my god,
front
her
of herself.
clap is so dramatic.
It's dramatic, but it's just because like I think like she's European.
She's like, how do you feel if a woman guides you? And he was like, I love it. And that was the end of the conversation.
Okay, so we have three options here.
You're
You
good.
can see an interview with young David Letterman. You can see her take a caller who's nervous about having sex with a more experienced lover, or you can see both. I can facilitate both
We
for you.
can do both.
Okay.
An ad for aloe vera.
And I like when... Are you using contraceptives?
He was so controversial already, you know?
What I do like... I tell you, David.
Yes,
what I
but
do
only
like,
at parties.
God.
She looks at young David Letterman and with a tiny little grandma
Yeah.
finger points at his face and goes, "Are you using contraceptives?"
Yeah. And, he
he's
said,
like,
only at parties.
Right, but after like clearly 30 seconds of like skin crawling
Of like,
and
oh, Jesus.
what's gonna get past the like
The censors,
correct,
yeah, and the
100%.
producers.
And
Because
then
at this point, is it live at this point?
or
is
it's
it
almost all still pre-recorded, but
okay.
you invite her on.
It's still pre-recorded.
you
today,
invite
but-
her on knowing what she's about to say.
Yeah.
All right, we have we distributed some questionnaires to the studio audience. We'd like you to respond to these, if you don't mind. Is it abnormal for a 19-year-old? Tell me if this is the kind of question you get. Is it abnormal for a 19-year-old to be nervous around older women, but to be very attracted to them? And this is from a 19-year-old male.
Of course. That's a fantastic question, David, and I'll tell you why. What he really wants to know, probably, and what I would generalize about that question is that it's perfectly all right to get erections, even at places where erections are not called for because he
I'm
can't use
obsessed.
that erection at that time, around women in general. And if this particular 19-year-old does feel a certain movement in his genitalia, that it's perfectly all right, he shouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
And so that's it. Like you're like it's this sweet old woman who uses the medically correct term,
love her.
who just for whatever reason of the 1980s got a full pass to say
Just
erection
whatever she
and
could.
genitalia. Okay, this next one. This is so sweet. I love this. So it's on her show. Someone calls in. So Dr. Ruth is about to connect with someone who's not physically in the room with her, but they're on the air. Like you'll hear the back and
Yeah.
forth. And I'm giving away a little bit of the video. It's cool. It's about 2.5 minutes. You can tell that the caller is so nervous at the start.
Oh.
And you get to see kind of why Dr. Ruth is so loved, because this is a person who legitimately wants this question answered, is worried about this part of his life.
Yeah.
And Dr. Ruth, with a smile on her face the entire time, fully just explains what he needs to know about the
She's
situation.
just so sweet. Okay.
Hello? You're on the air.
Yes, Dr. Ruth.
Yes.
This is Chris. I'm calling from North Carolina.
Hello there, Chris.
My question today is, I've been dating this girl for about 2 years now, and she's been married before and has been sexually active.
Hold on.
I'm
You
22
talk
years
too
old,
fast. Chris,
still a
you
virgin.
talk too fast. I can't get it. You have
She's
been
an
involved with
immigrant.
this girl for 2 years.
Right.
And
She has been married before and has been, sexually active.
has been sexually active before.
Right.
Right?
I'm 22 years old and have never, had sex. I'm still a virgin.
Yes.
And she's wanting to start a sexual relationship.
She's willing to?
She's wanting to, and I'm very nervous about it.
Okay. Now I understand why you talk so fast.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Chris,
Yes.
let me tell you something. First of all, wipe off your mind that she has been sexually active before. She was married, so of course she has been sexually active, right? Wipe that off your mind. Because if you start to compete with somebody because they've had more experiences, you're going to run into trouble. Let me tell you something, Chris. Make sure that when that first sexual experience, when that time is right, number one, that you know that either she or you use a contraceptive, okay?
Oh my
So
God,
that you
I
don't
fucking
have to
love
worry
her.
about
Yes.
that. Number two, Chris, take your time. If I may make a suggestion, do not do it late at night. Don't do it when you are tired. Try either in the morning or late morning, sometime during the weekend when the two of you are together, when you feel real good. And then say to yourself, it's all right. I might try it and it might not work the first time. So what? I have a whole lifetime ahead of me, right?
I'm in love
You're
with
only
her.
22. And let her guide you a little bit. Tell me something. In the 2 years that you have known her, have you kissed?
Yes.
Okay. Have you necked?
Yes.
Have you have you held each other tight?
Yes.
Have you touched her
Yes.
breasts?
Yes.
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 Have you touched her clitoris or around the area of her vagina?
No, I haven't.
Have not. Okay. Let her guide you how she needs to be touched. Okay?
Okay.
Good luck to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
That was the most wholesome
Yeah.
ass conversation with I would tell her anything.
Yes. Yes, I would feel safe to tell her anything. And that's what millions of Americans, because I think also what we need to appreciate a little bit more is that this woman is doing this before there's internet.
That's in the fact that she
These
was doing this in
people-
the 60s is
Yeah. 60s, 70s, 80s. So the
Just
show comes out in the 80s.
wild
But that's
to
the Reagan
me.
administration.
Yeah.
Like it's a conservative time in American culture. And there's not a lot of like easy, secretive access to information. And people are listening to her because they want to know this information and they would like it to be less stigmatized. But we're all, still to this day, we're all nervous about ourselves in that
about
part of our lives.
talking about it or
We're-
thinking about it or
is
like
is my body weird? Is my body gross? Did I do it wrong? How do I? This is such a vulnerable thing to do with somebody.
Yes.
How do I know that they like it? Like there's so many unpredictable qualities to it, and I do think, to a degree, people in our generation are just deciding, that's not worth the risk. I'm not
Yeah.
going to be that vulnerable with somebody. And what she is saying to this even more stifled society than we live in now,
Yes.
is that it's good.
It's
That you don't have
okay.
to feel it's okay. It's good. It's good
It's
that you
good.
want to do this. And
still be curious, be a lifelong learner.
Right, be a
like,
lifelong learner. Listen to your partner. That it's okay if you don't feel like you're going to get it right the first time.
Yeah.
Her line, "It's okay if I don't get it right this time. I have
my
a whole
whole
life ahead of me," is so
That's
deeply
so
powerful. And
knowing her where she came from.
yes, and so obviously she becomes an icon. She is with us for a very, very long time, long enough to field a question from a millennial
Shut up.
about dating apps.
Oh my god.
Okay, and this will be the last clip for a while.
I am
Um,
unprepared.
but here you go.
I'm part of the millennial group that is having trouble finding a significant other. We have lots of options with
She is
online dating
tiny.
and Tinder and Bumble and all sorts of other things that are available to us. But I have just had no luck. I mean, for years and years and years, pretty much always of, having difficulty finding a significant other. And I do think it has to do with my generation, a little bit older than me as well. It seems like everybody is on their own personal adventure and they don't have time for connections and relationships. So I wanted to ask you if you could give one small piece of advice for my group what would that be? On finding love, finding connection.
The questions about millennials and the use of technology and how that might adversely affect people finding a connection.
I'm all for you people using it, and because I'm so concerned about people being lonely, not just the millennials, that's the emphasis, but in general, but you have to be smart about it. Because people can lie. They can say that they're 6 feet tall when they are 4'7".
She was 4'7".
And you have to be smart of never, ever meeting somebody in a secluded place, but to meet in the lobby of a hotel, in a public place. But I'm all for people using it because I'm very concerned about that issue of loneliness.
Oh my God.
So she's an icon who lived by what she preached her entire life. And this isn't necessarily part of my notes too, but obviously she takes over in like the 80s and she becomes famous for this kind of work. And so people would look at her sometimes and be like, you know, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, like, you're the sex old lady, right? Like that's what you are. So is it true with Mr. Westheimer? And she goes, it's all talk, you know, it's all talk what I do. And so then they would interview him sometimes and they'd be like, do you feel weird about your wife? You're in her 60s at this point. Do you feel weird about your wife talking about this kind of stuff, or 50s and 60s? And he goes, no, she's wonderful. And she's
he loves her so much.
And you know, it's a funny line, and I love her, and she's clearly connecting with people, and just supported her, and didn't have a single moment of like insecurity about it. At least publicly, you never know what happens behind closed doors.
Yeah,
but like publicly was like.
But publicly is a big thing. Like it's hard to hide those kinds of emotions.
Me reading between the lines is basically from the handful of interviews that I watched of the two of them, and there's not a lot, right? Because he was kind of a private person, but. To me, the vibe that I got was that the world was meeting the woman he fell in love with. And of course he wasn't ashamed of her for that.
Shut up, Grant.
Okay. So also, side note, the look on the faces of the interviewers when she would say the things that she would say.
They're like still uncomfortable.
They're like, they know what's coming and are still so.
Especially like
the men especially are
hearing
not.
that come from what she looks like, right? Like she looks like your grandmother.
There's this great interview and she's with a pop star. I forget like what the exact name was at the time, but she was talking about like an ex or whatever. And she was like, what did you show him? What you want? And you could see this pop star like fall out of her chair essentially. In the 1980s she's in her 50s, she's in her 60s in the 90s, and she's 4'7" and she has these glasses and she has this big perm that my grandma had her entire life.
But she has like these red cat eye glasses, I want you to imagine. Like she's tiny but she's precious.
This next section is just some of my favorite quotes about her and from her.
The way her and Ruth Bader Ginsburg are going to be side by side on stickers I'm about to post on Etsy.
Okay, so quote, don't fake it, don't be unhappy and frustrated, but do something about it, specifically about your love life and your sex life.
Wow.
In 1985, she gave a talk at Oklahoma State University in which a private citizen stormed the stage and attempted to do a citizen's arrest.
Her?
There's even an audio file where it goes, and he uses the word doctor, so shout out, he still kept the credentials.
Yeah.
But he was like, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, you are under citizen's arrest.
For what?
And then campus security takes him off the stage.
That's like Madame Lou Graham, where she gets arrested and then the mayor loses his job.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like, there was no natural place for me to put this. And so I was like, here's just a collection of greatest hits that didn't make their way into a full section.
Well, it's hard to it's hard to put these kinds of things into a narrative. From one storyteller to another.
One of her nicknames, correct. And thank you for understanding. I think they appreciate this. One of her nicknames was, quote, the happy munchkin of sex.
Offensive, I think, to some people,
for
but
sure.
also, well, technically, isn't she considered like a short person?
I'm not navigating those
because
waters. She's sex positive.
Casey's sister, I think, is 4'11".
Really?
And is was like jokingly irritated that she was not short enough
Right.
to be
She
qualified
was
as a
too
short
tall.
person.
Yeah.
So I feel like she has to be.
Two others. I think deep down, people know if you're not happy, go to therapy.
Yeah.
At least try a separation so you can start a new life. And then I put in parentheses, Dr. Ruth was married 3 times. Okay.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, that's not a condemnation.
She trusted love
one
more time.
No, but what she did trust was herself. She was like,
Yeah.
I want this marriage to work. I want love to work. She, like, kind of controversially for our modern morals, was really cool with sex within marriage.
Yeah.
With sex within a relationship that felt really serious, and was famous for not really advocating. I won't say approve because I don't think she ever used the word approve once in her entire life,
Yeah.
but did not advocate for one night stands.
Yeah.
But she was like, you're with a person and you're happy together. And if you're not happy together, fix it. But your lot in life is not to be miserable for the
If
rest
the
of
reason
your
you're
life.
unhappy is your like sexual relationship,
Right.
then do something about it. Talk to each other. Talk to
Yes.
someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
That like and to hear it from a woman who has lived through what Dr. Ruth had lived through, when she's like, you are the driver of your life and you need to make decisions, and you are only ever stuck in a situation that you have accepted. You have to believe that woman when she says that because of what she has lived through and the decisions she had made for herself, you know?
Yeah.
Final quote before I launch into the next section, and this is something that she said all the time. People talk normal, is it normal? There is no such thing as normal. We are all normal. Because in the 1980s, when Dr. Ruth becomes famous and her reputation takes off and she's talking about sex on television and the radio,
Yeah.
there's a second thing that's happening, and that's the AIDS crisis.
Oof.
And it's deeply controversial. Ronald Reagan famously doesn't use the word HIV/AIDS until his second term in the 1984 and beyond.
Grant won't say it, but I'll say it. He's a fucking dickhead and asshole.
Correct. I said it a lot like 2 episodes ago.
Well, you implied it a lot. I try and at least censor the curse words you say.
I appreciate you.
Yeah.
In 1984, Westheimer began hosting several television programs on the Lifetime TV network and one in syndication. Her first show was Good Sex with Dr. Westheimer, airing for half an hour at 10 p.m. on weeknights. And each night she ended with reminding her audience to, quote, have good sex. And her career takes off as we get into the late 90s and early 2000s. Her half-hour show becomes an hour long. She gets another radio program. She writes books. She stars in her own sitcom, Dr. Ruth's House.
Shut up.
The network decides not to take it past pilot, but the pilot premieres.
Oh, I'm going to watch that pilot.
As you should.
Yeah.
She releases a board game, and at least...
Shut up.
And it's called the Good
We
Sex
have to
board
play
game.
that board game.
Yeah, probably. We need to find it because it's going to have to be on like eBay or somewhere. But yes.
Oh my God. That would
comes-
be so funny.
She comes out with 2 Good Sex video games.
Shut the fuck up.
It's like 89 and like 93 when she comes
It's
out with
crazy
some of
that
these
like
things.
to do that even today would be crazy.
What's
would
crazy
be like
to me
wild.
is that a little girl born in 1928 Germany would
Yeah.
come out in her lifetime with a sex positive video game.
and
How is
board
that a real
game,
thing?
board game and video game. Like
She has no problem seeing sex as a good and natural part of her religious life, even citing a Talmudic mandate that an unemployed man must make love to his wife every day until he gets a job.
oh my gosh.
So she's not like micro celebrity. She's not kind of famous.
yeah.
She's famous.
Yeah.
She's famous. She is everywhere. And she is a huge advocate for HIV/AIDS research.
Which is incredible.
Right. Especially considering that she starts talking about HIV/AIDS in the 80s. When, like, there's this one clip. I decided not to pull it because I thought the other ones were more fun. But
Yeah.
there's this one quote. There's 2 different clips. Okay, I'm going to talk about both real quick. In the first clip, a man calls in to ask Dr. Ruth, and this man, this is terms from the 1980s. I'm quoting it nearly verbatim. This man's like, my girlfriend is friends with a lot of homos, and they share cigarettes, and they share drinks, and they go out dancing together. I'm a straight guy, am I at risk of getting HIV from my girlfriend?
I mean, that's like honestly a valid question.
Right. And Dr. Ruth is like, okay, yes, I understand. Yes.
Yes.
No, your girlfriend is not at risk of having HIV, AIDS. But like, if you are worried about that, like,
Here's
safe
what you
sex
do.
is what to do.
Yeah.
Right. And the second clip that I decided not to pull was a live audience member stood up with the microphone and asked, he was like, the vast majority of people who are diagnosed with HIV AIDS are part of the homosexual lifestyle. Don't you think? And she cuts him off right there. And she goes, I have never wasted any time assigning blame to anyone. I'm about education and working towards a cure. And that's the whole conversation. And she says, okay, at the end of it, and like smiles, but she's like, not in my studio audience in 1985 are you going to assign blame to gay people for
85?
AIDS. Yeah, she's incredible. And the thing too is like,
Oh my God.
because her station doesn't just talk about gay sex, it talks about everything. It's covered nationwide. You can be a closeted gay teen in Oklahoma, in Utah, in Wyoming, in downstate, upstate, middle of nowhere, wherever, and hear this nationally famous person, one, talk about you with respect, not view you as a gross sicko. And then second, it's an appropriate thing for you to listen to. Everyone listens to Dr. Ruth. Yeah. You're a red-blooded American man. Of course you're listening to the sex show, right? And she's like, even if you're gay, you need to use condoms. Like, make sure you are protecting yourself. Take care of yourself, young men in this country. Protect yourself. And it's a message that they get to hear because no one else is telling them this in their life. We have a couple quotes from Dr. Ruth about this specifically.
I'm literally in love with this woman.
She has immense social power, and she's talking about things Americans do not talk about. And she's talking about AIDS, how to avoid contracting HIV, what is and is not safe, the power of sex, and the importance of safe sex. Most importantly, she talks about people dying of AIDS at the time, the majority of whom were gay men, with respect, like they are equals, and insist that others do the same, saying, quote, I take this very personally because of my background. As a German Jewish refugee, I certainly have a sensitivity for people who are regarded as subhuman. And I believe strongly that we as a society have to give these people all this respect. As I said, she said on air, I don't waste time assigning blame to any group. I say let's educate and find a cure. And then in 2018, she shared, I lost a lot of friends to that awful disease, but I stay optimistic. I still believe that there will be a cure. She attended AIDS fundraising galas and most importantly used her national platform to push the importance of safe sex practices in an environment that was free of judgment and preaching. Her message reached millions and no doubt saved thousands.
Oh my God.
I know. And she's just this tiny little thing.
In the fucking 80s.
Yeah.
Jesus.
When she does pass, and I'll tell you when that happens, but when she does pass,
I'm not okay. I'm not ready for that.
organizers of HIV AIDS communities post all these photos of hers from the 80s, from the 90s, of the 2000s, of her at these AIDS galas. A lot, like one talked specifically about, I'm 6'1" and she's 4'7", so I had to lean down for her to plant this big red kiss on my cheek. And as I pulled away, she looks at me and she goes, "Are you using contraception?" And I had to promise Dr. Ruth that, yes, I was, that I was using contraception, and that she walked the walk and she just lived authentically. And then she went home every night to Fred in their little apartment
Fred Boomer.
No, Dan Boomer.
Dan Boomer.
Fred Westheimer.
Oh, Fred Westheimer. Sorry.
Okay. She would appear in game shows, including Hollywood Squares. She appeared on The Ellen Show twice for her 90th birthday.
On Ellen?
Uh-huh. She starred in a music video, played a therapist on a PBS Kids show, helping children afraid of reading or spelling long words. She was nominated for a Grammy for her children's spoken word album, Timeless Tales and Music of Our Time. CBS Sunday Morning, which my parents watch religiously offered this description of her. Like they interviewed her, and it looks like 2005 to 2010 range. And there's a specific moment that I want you guys to listen to because she's at this point well into her late 70s, early 80s.
I read that you're looking for a boyfriend.
I'm looking not just for one friend. Don't say boyfriend. I'm too old for boyfriend. I'm certainly here on CBS television. I certainly am looking for interesting companionship. So you have
Sexual companionship?
everything. So you have to promise me, if after this broadcast, if you get letters,
Thousands of emails?
whatever you get, I want to hear. You can sift through. I'll tell you what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Has to be interesting. Has to be somebody who doesn't sit and says, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I don't care if he works or not, because all I care about that he is engaged in life. He doesn't have to have money. I have enough money. I don't have to get married.
Younger or older?
That's a bit difficult question. I can't answer that. It has to be
So is
somebody-
Dr. Ruth in the market for a boy toy? We can be sure about this. He'll need a positive attitude and a good pair of running shoes to keep up with her.
Running shoes.
As they said that part, they showed pictures of her with Bill Clinton, her with Steve Jobs, and hers with Bill Gates.
Oh my gosh.
She has advice to young people. I might show part of the clip. I probably won't. I'm gonna get to something. So she, towards the end of her life, she had advice to young people. Most importantly, quote, get out there and meet other people. She went on BuzzFeed when she was 91 years old to give advice, including advice that vibrators are good, that men don't like them on their balls, and that if you use a vibrator, be cautious not to get too used to it, so that way you didn't get desensitized to intercourse with a regular stimulation with the other one. She wrote almost 50 books about how and why to have good sex, among other things. Quote, because I'm an old woman, people would say, I wish my mom could have talked to me like this. Dr. Ruth passed away on July 12th, 2024. Her husband...
2024?
Yeah, like 6 months ago. Her husband, Fred, died of a stroke in 1997 when Dr. Ruth was only 69 years old. A woman who had... Crazy to see you say that with literal tears.
I had tears running down my face.
Okay, was so not prepared for that.
I'm shocked that you weren't expecting me to do that.
No, I was crying when I was writing that, Maia. I wasn't expecting you to say that. I'm going to give you a second and then I'm going to continue.
I'm ready.
Okay, you're not. That's fine.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So her husband, Fred, passes away in 1997 due to a stroke when Dr. Ruth was only at the end of her 60s, almost 70. She would live on for another 27 years.
Oh my gosh.
Quote, having to make decisions in my own life at such an early age showed me a woman needs to take charge of their own life. I think about that scared little girl who lost her parents at the age of 10 and had no choice but to continue to live. Perhaps I shouldn't be surprised that she would spend the rest of her life as an advocate for love, helping others find warmth and intimacy with the people they loved most. I apologize for saying this again, but in doing my research, it is impossible for me not to feel the weight of what she had lived through, what she had lost, what she had to mourn and live without, and to still be so filled with so much love, so much understanding, and so much openness. That she chose to stay open to everything, despite all that she experienced, is a true testament to her character. And to those who knew of Dr. Ruth before today's episode, I hope you take this away. Her sex advice was useful, but her life was an inspiration. And I'll finish with this. 2 things. First, I saw a study recently, and it looked at the people who were considered most popular in like a general population. And they got down to these individual responses. And they determined that the people who were most popular in any given social circumstance was the individual who reported liking the most people. That just an individual who moved through the world so excited to see others was the person everyone was excited to see. And I think that's Dr. Ruth. And so I'll end with a quote. And it's a quote that she ends her own documentary with. Quote, "When I'm 10, I survived the Nazis. When I'm 20, I'm almost killed by an artillery shell. If I could talk to my younger self, I would say to that girl, despite the fact that you have lived through some tragic events, look at what has happened to your life."
Jesus Christ.
I really thought this was going to be a much funnier episode.
So, when you did Reality Winner, I cried for the first time on this podcast. I have cried so much during today's episode that I am like deeply unwell. I do want to make a quick caveat.
Yeah.
To my girlies, my girls, gays, theys, whoever, who are on antidepressants, anti-anxiety drugs, anti-whatever that could affect your libido. I don't want you to feel like you are less than for listening to this episode and not feeling like you still quite understand what Ruth is talking about. Because that's not you. You are not the problem. There are so many other systemic issues that are at play there. Ruth is playing a big part in society, in feminism, in how to talk about a stigmatized issue. And for those of us who are on drugs that affect libido, I think it's safe to say that Ruth would be a person that would advocate for you.
I can actually do you one better.
Yeah.
You don't actually need to project in this situation.
Yeah.
Ruth was a long time advocate that you should never have sex when you feel pressured, and that saying no to sex does not make you a bad person or sexually unattainable or like devious. That like a huge part of good sex is consent between two people who were willingly pursuing it at the time. I think Dr. Ruth would have validated you.
And if you're with someone that's pressuring you and you feel guilty because you have a low libido for whatever reason, don't feel like you're less than. But just understand that you are accepted, not just because we're talking about sex positive conversations or anything like that, but understand that there are people out there that feel the same as you. Don't feel like there's like TikToks out there now that are like, I thought I had a low libido because I was with so-and-so and then I broke up with them and then I met another person who now I just like want to have sex with all the time. Like,
Right.
Don't feel like you're in that situation just because you know you love someone but your libido is low, you know.
When you told me that the theme for this episode was naughty or nice, I like pretty quickly, within like probably a day, decided I was going to do Dr. Ruth. And I just want to say now to you, thank you again for creating this forum with me, to like get a chance to explore topics that I thought I already knew. And then, as has happened dozens of times on this podcast, you scratch 1 inch below the surface and you find this whole world. Because when you told me we were doing naughty or nice, I was like, cool, I'm going to do the grandma sex therapist. Like that's so funny. Like, of course I'm going to do the grandma sex therapist. Like, there's going to be hilarious sex advice from a grandma and she has like a little bit of a German accent and that's going to be so funny. And then you get into it and then you're like, this person was so deeply shaped by the lack of love they experienced as a child that instead of becoming like the villain in every Marvel movie, instead was like, I have found love and I have curated it and I believe everyone deserves to have love on terms that make them feel safe and supported. And you're like, oh my God, why am I crying again all of a sudden, you know? Like it becomes this like what was supposed supposed to be this like funny little like, because like of course like SNL does like an impersonation of her and like Mad TV does.
Yeah.
And she was in on the joke. Like she understood why people thought like her system was funny. And like I think she was also aware that like her identity markers meant that she could talk about the stuff, and it still
it's
meant
not
that
stigmatized.
Right, that people were talking about it still, and
it's a
she
huge thing.
loved
Even
it.
like in the mental health community, like if you are on these mental health drugs that are causing low libidos, like she is breaking those stigmas already, and that's a huge thing the mental health community faces, is breaking those stigmas of even talking about your like anxiety or your depression or your bipolar tendencies or whatever. And it's just like such a huge thing to like encourage you to like fight the tendencies that your medication causes, or to like do what you feel like society tells you can't do. And it's just like, I've said this a couple times, like jokingly, I am literally obsessed with this woman.
Yes, as it kind of are all supposed to be. And so I said at the start, as definitely aware of the joke, that a lot of her story reminded me of my grandmother that passed in the spring, that I talked a little bit about with you guys. My grandma built this huge family, and you know, I think showed love to her kids in the way that she understood. And
is your mom's or dad's?
My mom's side.
My mom's side.
And you know, I think like expressions of love was just different for generations and stuff. And my grandmother having to leave school at 8th grade to support her family when she did not want to, and getting the chance to decades later go to nursing school and work in a local like clinic in the farming community that she lived in and take care of some of the people that she'd spent with all of her life, I know was deeply satisfying to her. And refusing to be defined by circumstances and building a family of love all around you. Like, obviously, I never once said the word sex around my grandmother, right? Like, I am so aware of the differences between Dr. Ruth and Grandma. But at the same time, there are elements of Ruth that I identified with that just made her feel really real to me. And if you have the chance, aka if you have Hulu, I would encourage you to watch the Dr. Ruth documentary. You are not going to be shocked about 80% of this episode. You watch, you know how.
No, that's how it is. That's how it is, and you build up that story based off of what your like one base like source is.
Not to get into investigative journalism, but like for reals, I watched that documentary and I was like, okay, so that's the story I want to tell.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm crying in the club, which I warned you about.
Yeah, you were, and I was like, "That's hilarious." Anyway, Casey bought me a heated blanket tonight,
and I was like, "Haha, nice. Hope it's unregulated and gonna burn your house down." Haha, love you, bitch. And
anyway, I'm gonna ruin your life tomorrow night.
Meanwhile, I'm over here just like trying to find sources that like verify everything that I had just read. And yeah, what a really special thing that we get to do together, and what a really incredibly special woman, and how lucky I think we all are to have her. And correct me if I'm wrong, I am saying there's a 49% chance I'm wrong here, but I do believe there's a saying, at least in some Jewish communities, that when someone passes, you look at people who know her and you say, may her memory be a blessing. And I do think that we have the benefit of Dr. Ruth's memory being a blessing, because I think there are people who are alive today, who are happy today because of the way Dr. Ruth moved our conversation. And I'm really grateful for her.
I'm like unwell, Grant. Like, if you're not watching the video platform, I encourage you to watch the last 10 minutes of this, because I had like tears streaming down. Both me and Grant had like tears streaming down our faces as we're saying all of this.
This was supposed to be my like relax episode after like Cheese Caves,
like,
and I did Reality Winner before.
You fucked up. This is all your fault.
This was supposed to be my chill episode as I gear up for 2025.
Now I'm like, how do I make Grant cry?
Girl, you know you can't. I told you.
I know.
I take my pyramid of needs and I untangle it until I get to a place where I'm
Which is so
fine.
Deeply unsettling.
Yeah, and I actually think maybe a little unwell, but I'll figure that out in 2026.
We'll figure out how to get you a therapist.
Okay, I'll do the speech. Hey, if you want to be one of the people that has joined us on Cameo, that's the thing that's happening now.
Yeah, I have an
Cameo.
alarm on my phone set to remind us to record our first Cameo ever.
Maya can't be on camera because she is so puffy right now, but I can.
Shut up! So, I'm fine. fine. I'm beautiful.
If you know that's true. If you
No,
want to
I
join us
don't.
on Cameo, we're there and others are there. You can find us on social media where we are Will I Laughed or Will I Laughed Podcast, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. YouTube has the video versions of our episodes.
Where we're both crying right now.
Correct. And then, of course, we're available wherever you get your podcast, but you know that because you're listening to us right now. And if you would like additional content where we tell more secrets and cry less, you can find us on
Don't jinx
Patreon.
us like that.
You can find us on Patreon where we are Will I Laugh Podcast. And for $5 more a month, you get an additional episode where we really tell all. I think I've hit all the check marks in my brain. Friends, thank you so much for joining us today.
We love you.
Love you. Bye.
Okay, bye.